The Muellers were not just an ordinary family, they were deeply passionate about weapons, which played a significant role in their lives. The father, William Mueller, was more than just an avid collector. He held a federal firearms license, allowing him to operate as a licensed gun dealer. Additionally, he worked as a self-employed electrician, and his life revolved around firearms, buying, selling, and using them. William was married to Nancy, and they had an 8-year-old daughter named Sarah, their only child. They adored her and considered her the heart of their family. They lived in Tilly, Arkansas, a small, close-knit community where William and Nancy chose to homeschool Sarah. Their weekends often revolved around attending weapons shows, a shared interest that strengthened their family bond. As a result, their home was filled with weapons, ammunition, and large amounts of cash. This valuable collection made them an attractive target for thieves. In 1995, tragedy struck when their home was burglarized by Kirby, a man who was a family friend. He stole a weapon and cash, but the robbery did not deter the Muellers from their love of weapons or their business. This robbery is important to remember, as it plays a crucial role in the investigation that follows. Fast forward to January 1996. The Mueller family was out enjoying quality time together, unaware that two men were lurking in the shadows of their home, waiting for the moment they returned. As soon as the Muellers entered their home, they were confronted by two men who appeared to be FBI agents. However, these men were not genuine agents, they were imposters. Without delay, the men tied the family to chairs. When William, aged 52 at the time, refused to comply, the situation escalated frighteningly. The intruders separated the family members and began torturing them while asking questions. Despite the torment they endured, they did not divulge any information, which led the men to target their 8-year-old daughter, Sarah. The men interrogated Sarah about the family's wealth, asking where they kept their money and valuables. To force her to speak, one of them used an electric cattle prod on her. While this tool is not lethal, it causes excruciating pain, especially for a young child. Eventually, Sarah revealed the location of their cash, which amounted to $50,000, as well as weapons and ammunition. One might assume that they would take what they wanted and leave, but the nightmare continued. Next, the intruders used stun guns on the family, rendering them unconscious. They took their time with this, almost as if they were enjoying the slow torture. Sadly, it didn't stop there. What happened next was even worse. They suffocated the family by placing sealed plastic bags over their heads. 2 weeks passed before anyone noticed that something was seriously wrong. Nancy's mother, Berlene Peterson, hadn't heard from her daughter at all during that time. This was very unusual for Nancy, as she always called after their trips, especially after attending weapon shows. Concerned, Berlene contacted the sheriff to express her worries. Sheriff J. Winters, familiar with the Muellers despite living in a neighboring county, agreed to help. However, when he spoke to the neighbors, they seemed unconcerned. Many believed the Muellers had simply gone on a short getaway and hadn't felt the need to check in. It seemed like everyone assumed they just needed some time away and that everything was fine. Then, on February 11th, a month later, the situation took a frightening turn. A farmer found the Muellers' Jeep abandoned on the side of the highway, far from where it should have been. This discovery reignited the investigation. Inside the Jeep was Nancy's purse, which contained her wallet and ID, but there was no sign of the family. As the weeks passed, their disappearance became increasingly concerning as no leads emerged. After 5 months, a breakthrough occurred when an elderly couple went fishing in a swamp near Russellville. While waiting for a fish to bite, the woman got her line caught on something. When she tried to free it, she realized she had hooked a boot that still contained a man's leg bone. Frightened, she called the police to report the incident and seek help. This prompted sheriff to initiate another search, organizing teams to comb through the bayou using metal hooks and divers. By the end of the day, they uncovered parts of a body. The torso had been weighed down by a rock, and duct tape was wrapped around the head. Investigators immediately recognized that this was no ordinary crime. It appeared to be a calculated execution. The remains belonged to a small female, and initially, investigators suspected it might be the body of a 6-year-old girl who had been reported missing from a neighboring county the previous year. However, upon closer examination, the size and clothing did not match. This led them to consider the possibility that it could be Sarah Mueller. The following day, 2 additional partial bodies were found. All 3 torsos were similarly weighed down with rocks, and their heads were tightly wrapped in plastic bags and secured with duct tape. The scene was haunting. Using dental records, DNA, and clothing, authorities confirmed the identities of the bodies as William Mueller, his wife Nancy, and their 8-year-old daughter, Sarah. What had begun as a missing persons case quickly escalated into a horrific triple homicide investigation. The coroner determined that the bodies had likely been in the water since January 11th, the last day they were seen. However, further investigation revealed small specks of blue paint on the tape. These paint samples were sent to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C., where it was confirmed that the paint matched that used on General Motors vehicles. This lead suggests that 2 individuals were involved. One drove the blue car carrying the bodies, while the other followed in William's Jeep. By the time the bodies were dumped, the Muellers were presumably already dead, having been suffocated by the plastic bags. The investigation then focused on the Muellers' possessions. After the family's disappearance, most valuables were taken by relatives, but some items were left in William's garage. Among the findings was a weapon case that had a serial number, although the weapon itself was missing. They also discovered a family photo with friends. The authorities entered the weapon's serial number into the National Crime Information Center database and were able to trace it back to a man named Travis Brake, who had been arrested months earlier in Seattle, Washington, for carrying a concealed weapon. Travis confesses that he sold the weapon at a show and describes the 2 men he bought it from. One man caught his attention. Investigators showed him a photo they had discovered among the Muellers' belongings, and he identified one of the men, Kirby Kehoe. This was the same man who had robbed the Muellers a year earlier. Kirby was familiar with trouble. He had an extensive criminal record involving firearms and was actively involved in the white supremacist movement. However, investigators needed more concrete evidence to arrest Kirby. Almost a year after the murder of the Mueller family, investigators caught a break in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. A trooper noticed a blue Chevy Suburban with suspicious bumper stickers parked in a handicap spot. Inside, police found a man named Sean Haynes and his girlfriend asleep. When police checked the serial numbers of 2 weapons found in a car, they discovered one of them was stolen and belonged to the Mueller family. When arrested and questioned, Sean admitted that he had traded one weapon for another at a motel 6 months earlier. The person involved in the transaction was Chavi Kehoe, Kirby Kehoe's eldest son. At this point, the investigators had 2 suspects. The Kehoe family was very different from the Muellers. Chavi Kehoe, 26 years old, grew up in a household where white supremacy was not just discussed but was a fundamental part of their lives. Chavi wasn't just a typical troubled young man. His parents' beliefs significantly influenced him, leading the family down a path of hate and violence. When Chavi was a child, the Kehoe family relocated from Florida to the serene hills of Madison County, North Carolina. Later, in the mid-1980s, they relocated again, this time to Stevens County in Washington. Chavi initially appeared to be a bright student, excelling as an honor student at Kettle Junior High School. However, in 1988, his parents decided to homeschool him, believing it would allow for more personalized attention. Unfortunately, instead of fostering a positive learning environment, this choice created an insular world filled with extreme ideas. From an early age, Chavi was drawn into a life of crime, learning about robbery, theft, and evading law enforcement. The Kehoe household fostered an atmosphere of hate and paranoia, steeped in anti-government beliefs that Chavi absorbed. Rather than nurturing healthy aspirations, his dreams became violent and driven by white supremacy. By the time he reached adulthood, he had a singular aim: to overthrow the U.S. government and establish his vision of a white supremacist utopia, which he called the Aryan People's Republic. This wasn't a mere phase for Chavi. This twisted ideology was central to his identity, and his family played a crucial role in shaping it. This influence became evident in 1995 when he participated in a violent kidnapping and robbery. In June of that year, he and a partner targeted Malcolm and Jill Friedman, a Jewish couple who owned a store where he had previously worked. The Friedman family was restrained with weapons, but this crime was not random. Chevy chose them specifically because of their ethnicity. This incident vividly illustrated the hate and violence he had been raised to accept. Based on the circumstances, there is reason to believe that Kirby and his son Chevy had been under police surveillance for some time. If Chevy was involved in a significant amount of criminal activity, Kirby, his father, was not immune to it either. Despite the lengthy criminal records of both men, they remained elusive until February 15, 1997, when an Ohio State police officer pulled over a blue Chevy Suburban. The vehicle was swerving, driving unusually slowly, and appeared suspicious. The driver ignored the trooper, but the passenger acknowledged him with a nod. Initially, the officer thought nothing of it until he noticed the passenger was continually watching him through the rearview mirror. This sparked the officer's instincts. He ran the license plate and discovered it had expired, and neither the driver nor the passenger had valid driver's licenses. When the trooper asked the driver to exit the vehicle, he complied but cautioned the officer not to touch him. Things escalated from there. As one of the deputies called for a tow truck to impound the vehicle, the driver suddenly dashed back to the car. The officers pursued him, but during the commotion, the passenger drew a weapon and began attacking the officers, creating enough chaos for the driver to jump back into the Chevy Suburban and flee. As the driver drove away, the passenger informed the officer that he had borrowed the truck from a friend. He then refused to be searched. While the officer was trying to check for weapons, he insisted that he did not want the officer to search through all his belongings. The driver then assured the officer that there was no problem and that he would not cause any trouble. It seemed that he was lying. It turns out the two men in this dramatic situation were Chevy and his brother Shane. After Chevy drove away in the Chevy Suburban, Shane, who was in the passenger seat, ran into the nearby woods. The police searched for him all day, but they couldn't catch him. Like Chevy, Shane was also heavily involved in white supremacy and was willing to use violence to support his beliefs. Later that day, Chevy ended up in another shootout, this time in the parking lot of an electrical supply company. He exchanged gunfire with two Wilmington police officers, Officer Richard Rick Wood and Sergeant Robert Bob Martin. During the chaos, an innocent bystander, 56-year-old Frank Marsden, was attacked in the shoulder. The shootout was recorded by the dash cameras of both officers and quickly became a significant news story. In 1997, footage of the police shootout aired on Fox's World's Scariest Police Shootouts, which quickly gained popularity and was featured on other shows like Most Shocking and World's Most Amazing Videos. During this time, the Kehoe brothers, Chevy and Shane, were evading capture while secretly traveling with their families in an RV across several states. Investigators were concerned that they would go to great lengths to avoid arrest, leading the police to intensify their search efforts. The police released images of Chevy and Shane, hoping that someone would be able to identify them or their vehicle. At Lake Hill Campground, officials discovered that the Kehoe family had been there in their RV, but they had left 2 days ago. As days turned into weeks, reports of the RV's sightings flooded in from all over the country. They were seen in various states, including West Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, Texas, and Montana, always managing to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. In Indianapolis, police found a stolen van linked to Chevy, which contained the gas receipt with his name on it, but there was no trace of Shane. A few days later, the Kehoe family's RV was discovered abandoned on a lonely road in Wyoming. When the police investigated, they found alarming items inside: weapons, ammunition, fake FBI jackets, U.S. Marshals badges, and materials for making bombs. The ATF bomb squad inspected the RV and, while they did not find any functional devices, the presence of these components suggested that the Kehoe family was preparing for something very dangerous. Authorities grew increasingly concerned about the escalating violence and potential actions of Chevy and Shane. As the search continued, it seemed that Chevy and Shane were consistently staying just out of reach. However, on June 16, 1997, investigators received a lead indicating that Shane, Chevy's brother, was ready to surrender. Shane disclosed their hiding spot for the previous months and revealed that after the shootouts in Ohio, they had sought refuge on a secluded ranch in southern Utah. The farm owner provided them with food and shelter as long as they worked. However, the situation took a turn for the worse when Chevy began to exhibit uncontrollable behavior due to his temper and paranoia. Chevy even expressed intentions to kill his wife, Karina Gum, who had Native American roots, and plotted to murder their parents, Kirby and Gloria, in order to raise his younger brothers according to his white supremacist beliefs. On June 12, Chevy's paranoia turned against Shane. Following a violent argument, Shane feared for his safety and that of his family, leading him to escape in the middle of the night with his loved ones, driving nearly 1,000 miles back to Washington state. This brought their extended period on the run to an end. Chevy was arrested on June 17, 1997, however, this was not the most significant aspect of the case. The critical information that Shane provided to law enforcement was that Chevy had confessed to being involved in the murder of the Muellers along with another unnamed individual. Around the same time in June 1997, their father, Kirby, was also arrested. This arrest was unexpected, as he had no connections to the murder of the Mueller family, nor did Shane. Just when Gloria, Chevy's mother, came forward to the police with shocking information. She revealed that her son Chevy had confessed to her about the gruesome details of the Mueller family murders. Gloria explained that these killings were not impulsive, instead, they had been planned for an entire year, beginning with the first robbery of the Mueller family in February 1995, which set everything into motion. Gloria stated that the incident was triggered when William Mueller, the head of the Mueller family, confronted Kirby, suspecting him of involvement in the robbery. During this confrontation, William was disrespectful to Kirby, which angered Chevy. This incident seemed to ignite something in Chevy, leading him to believe that William's disrespect justified a plan to rob and kill the Muellers. However, there was more to Chevy's actions than just a personal vendetta. According to law enforcement, Chevy was also motivated by the knowledge that William owned valuable weapons, high-end gear, and ammunition, which further intrigued Chevy. Gloria went on to identify a second person involved in the murders, Daniel Lewis Lee. Daniel was not unfamiliar to Chevy, the two knew each other through their connections in white supremacist groups. Chevy and Daniel were committed to establishing a whites-only nation, united by their shared beliefs. They planned to rob and kill the Mueller family, and cover up their involvement. Gloria explained that the Muellers left for a weapons show on January 11, 1996. While they were away, Chevy and Daniel disguised themselves as police officers and went to the Mueller home. When the Muellers returned, Chevy and Daniel ambushed them and tied them up. However, a key part of their plan did not go as intended. Gloria revealed that Daniel hesitated, especially when it came to killing Sarah, the daughter of the Mueller family. Unable to follow through, he let Chevy take over, and Chevy killed Sarah. In March 1999, Daniel and Chevy stood trial for the murder of the Mueller family. Both Cheney and Gloria testified against them, providing detailed accounts of the incident. The trial resulted in Chevy Kehoe being sentenced to life in prison, while Daniel Lewis Lee received a death sentence. Daniel had a troubled childhood marked by instability and violence. From a young age, he faced many challenges, including seizures and neurological issues, which led to stays in mental health facilities. However, he was often removed from those facilities due to his violent behavior. His struggles were exacerbated by his inability to manage his anger, which fueled his violent tendencies as he grew older. By the time Daniel was 17, his violent behavior escalated alarmingly. He was involved in the brutal murder of Joseph Wavra during a robbery, marking his third murder in a series of violent offenses. Shockingly, Daniel managed to avoid a murder charge and instead received only a suspended sentence for the robbery, a decision that seemed unjust given the severity of his actions. Unfortunately, this leniency failed to curb Daniel's violent tendencies, it only encouraged him, allowing his appetite for violence to grow unchecked. Daniel met Che-Vai in 1995, united by their mutual disdain for the government and their desire to create a white supremacist stronghold. In court, Daniel attempted to portray himself as someone who could change for the better, claiming he had a good side. This seemed insincere given his history of violence. His plea felt more like a fictional redemption story than reality. The court was not convinced. Daniel's past was too horrific, and nobody believed he could truly reform. Eventually, Daniel was executed by lethal injection in 2020. This marked the first federal execution of a prisoner in 17 years. Daniel was executed in Indiana after the U.S. Supreme Court allowed it to proceed. He had been convicted of murdering 3 members of an Arkansas family, including an 8-year-old girl, back in 1996. However, he maintained his innocence to witnesses on the day of his execution. The Supreme Court overturned lower court decisions that raised concerns about potential suffering caused by lethal injection. Interestingly, while Che-Vai was the mastermind behind the brutal murders of the Mueller family, he avoided the death penalty. In contrast, Daniel, who played a less direct role, faced execution. This sparked confusion. How could the planner of the crime receive a lighter sentence than his accomplice? The situation became even more complicated when it was revealed that Che-Vai was connected to another major crime, the Oklahoma City bombing. Following Chevy's arrest, his brother Shane alleged that Che-Vai had prior knowledge of the bombing. Che-Vai was reportedly seen with Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, at a motel in Spokane several months before the bombing. The motel manager claimed that Che-Vai appeared excited about the bombing when the news broke and even hinted that something significant would occur on April 19. However, when the FBI investigated, they found no evidence that Timothy had ever visited Spokane or that Che-Vai was directly involved in the bombing. Che-Vai denied all allegations, but the rumors only deepened the intrigue surrounding him. Although Che-Vai had links to violent extremist groups, he faced lighter consequences compared to Daniel. In the end, Shane Kehoe was sentenced to 24 years for attempted murder and weapons possession related to an Ohio shootout, while their father, Kirby, received a 44-month sentence after pleading guilty to federal racketeering charges. Shane's sentence was eventually reduced to 11 years, and he was released from prison in 2008. However, his legal troubles continued. On October 14, 2013, he and Kirby were arrested in Arizona after a raid by the ATF uncovered a large marijuana-growing operation and a stockpile of weapons at an off-grid compound. Authorities confiscated 17 weapons, nearly 177,000 rounds of ammunition, 15 pounds of marijuana, and various types of body armor. Both Shane and Kirby pleaded guilty to being felons in possession of firearms and ammunition. In 2014, Shane received a 41-month prison sentence, while Kirby was sentenced to 10 years. Shane was released in September 2016, and Kirby followed in January 2022. As for Che-Vai, he spent a significant amount of time at the United States Penitentiary Florence ADX in Colorado, registered under the Federal Bureau of Prisons number 21300-009. He was later moved to various other facilities, including the United States Penitentiary Florence High and the United States Penitentiary McCreary in Kentucky. By 2022, Che-Vai was incarcerated at the United States Penitentiary Terre Haute, and one can only hope he is experiencing more suffering there than his victims did. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Jennifer Clark. Donald Clark, 40, and Jennifer Clark, 30, are a married couple living in the small town of Zebulon, Georgia, USA. For a time, their life together seemed happy. They have 2 sons together, and Donald also has an adult daughter from a previous relationship. Donald and Jennifer met in 1996 when Jennifer was 18. Despite a 10-year age gap, they quickly connected and got married in 1997. The following year, they welcomed their first son, and 2 years later, their second son was born. The family settled in Zebulon, a quiet rural town. Donald has always been a hardworking man. He dropped out of high school and started working immediately at a local factory. Over time, he pursued further education and advanced his career within the same company. Jennifer, on the other hand, worked as a nurse at a nursing home. Like any marriage, their relationship seemed harmonious at first. However, after the birth of their children, things began to change. Donald's daughter noticed that Jennifer was increasingly critical of him. When Donald's daughter became old enough, she decided to move out of the house. She chose to live with her grandparents due to Jennifer's erratic behavior. Unable to wait until adulthood to leave, she moved out early to escape the conflicts caused by her stepmother. For a while, Donald's daughter lived in Florida, but at 19, she became pregnant. She decided to move back in with her father for support. During this time, Jennifer and Donald appeared to be rebuilding their relationship. However, by the time the baby was born, Donald's daughter noticed that her father's relationship with Jennifer had deteriorated again. As before, the house was filled with arguments, and Jennifer continued to pressure and humiliate Donald. Once again, Donald's daughter was forced to move out. Many people advised Donald to end the marriage, but he hesitated because he appreciated Jennifer's housekeeping skills and her role in their daily lives. In early 2008, the couple moved into a new home in the same town. Around the same time, Michael Yost, the 22-year-old son of Donald's best friend Charlie, moved in with them. Michael had serious legal problems, had dropped out of school, and had begun using illegal drugs, which led to more charges and increased police surveillance. Hoping to help Michael turn his life around, Donald invited him to live with them. Jennifer quickly became close to Michael, which soon aroused Donald's suspicions. Eventually, Donald directly asked Michael if he was having an affair with Jennifer. Michael admitted to the affair. This revelation did not seem to surprise Donald, as Jennifer had been unfaithful to him on several previous occasions. Despite her repeated infidelity, Donald always forgave Jennifer, hoping to keep their marriage intact for the sake of their children. After learning about the affair, Donald asked Michael to move out of their home. Donald began to wonder what more he could do to make his wife happy. He provided for her and their children, was a loving husband, and a devoted father. However, it became clear to everyone that the problem was not Donald, but Jennifer. Donald decided to have an honest conversation with Jennifer about their problems. They finally came to the conclusion that it was time to separate. Over the next few days, they thought it over and ultimately agreed that divorce was the best decision. Everything seemed normal, with no signs of trouble. However, on the night of March 7, Donald woke up to find a sheet covering his face. He quickly threw the sheet off and was nearly hit in the head with a baseball bat that his wife Jennifer was holding. Donald immediately called the police to report his wife's unprovoked aggressive behavior. However, when the police arrived, he calmed down and decided he didn't want Jennifer to face legal consequences, so he withdrew the complaint. The incident, nonetheless, left an impression on the police. The next day, Donald went to court and filed for divorce. Jennifer left the house and moved in with Michael. At the time, Michael was living with his grandmother. Jennifer moved in with him, leaving the children in Donald's care. The breakup seemed to work out for everyone. During this time, Donald's friends noticed that he began to do much better. Eventually, life started to improve for him. Meanwhile, Jennifer told her family about her new relationship with Michael, and they were harshly critical. Her mother called it the stupidest decision she had ever made, claiming that Jennifer had left a wonderful husband and family for someone who wasn't worth it. By the spring of 2008, Donald and Jennifer had separated, but were still not divorced. During this time, Donald focused on his work and devoted all of his free time to caring for their two sons. Raising the boys alone was a challenge for him, so he decided to hire a live-in nanny. The nanny, Danielle Young, was a single mother in her 20s with two children from previous failed relationships. Donald met Danielle at a bar shortly after his separation. She immediately caught his attention, and they spent the evening talking. A few weeks later, Donald offered her a position as a babysitter for his children. Their relationship soon developed into a romantic one. During this time, unexpected problems arose. Jennifer discovered she was pregnant, but couldn't be sure whether the father was Donald or Michael. A DNA test was required to determine paternity. Jennifer decided to share the news with Donald. She went to his home, unaware that he had hired Danielle as a babysitter. Despite their separation, Jennifer became enraged when she saw another woman in the house. She stormed in, causing a scene, screaming and arguing. She then grabbed a baseball bat, threatened to harm Donald, and left the house. Danielle was shocked by the events that unfolded. She feared not only for her own safety, but also for the safety of her children. She became convinced that Jennifer was a threat to her sons. During the summer, Danielle decided to move away from Donald, partly because of their 17-year age gap. Meanwhile, Jennifer and Donald's divorce was finalized in July 2008. At the same time, a paternity test revealed that the child Jennifer was carrying was actually Michael's. Living conditions at Michael's grandmother's house were poor. Unfortunately, neither Jennifer nor Michael could afford to move out. A few months later, the couple moved into Donald's sister's house. She is very close to Donald and was surprised when he asked her to let Jennifer and Michael stay with. However, she agreed to help. Donald was likely trying to reconcile with Jennifer. He kept insisting that the boys needed a mother, and repeatedly tried to convince her to reunite and rebuild the family. However, Jennifer continued to refuse until October 2008. She eventually agreed to Donald's proposal and decided to return. She had come to realize that Michael was a failure. As both a husband and a father, he did not work, had no money, and their family lived in poverty. This ultimately led her to return to Donald. After her return, Jennifer resumed managing the household, taking care of the children, and handling daily responsibilities. Donald continued to work hard and spent his free time with his sons. Notably, he even accepted Jennifer's unborn child with Michael as his own, and planned to raise the child as part of the family. Despite their reconciliation, it was evident to everyone that the couple's relationship was extremely toxic, and even worse than it had been before the divorce. Nevertheless, Donald stubbornly clung to the illusion of a happy family life. Meanwhile, Michael came home from work to find Jennifer gone. She had left, taking all her belongings without saying a word. Later, Michael discovered that she had returned to her ex-husband, Donald. This devastated him, as he had been confident in the life they were building together and had even planned their future. In desperation, Michael begged her to come back. The situation became tense and unpredictable, with the potential to spiral out of control at any moment. On November 19, 2008, just before Thanksgiving, Donald's sister began to worry about him, as she had not heard from him for several days. While this might not have been a concern for most people, it was unusual for Donald, who was always in constant contact with his family. His complete silence raised red flags. Unable to reach him directly, she contacted Jennifer, who claimed she had no idea where Donald was. Following their conversation, Donald's sister went to the police to report him missing. Officers visited Donald's home and spoke with Jennifer. She explained that she had last seen him the previous night and had not noticed anything unusual. According to Jennifer, Donald had come home after work, had dinner, watched TV, and gone to bed. The next morning, he left for work as usual. Jennifer claimed they had exchanged text messages during his shift while she was taking the kids to school. Donald had read and responded to her messages. She then spent the rest of the day doing chores, but Donald did not return home at his usual time. She said she had no idea where he could be, and noted that his phone, wallet, papers, and car were all missing. Jennifer speculated that he might have run away. Donald's sister, however, strongly disagreed. She believed that such behavior was completely out of character for Donald. She knew he had done everything he could to make the relationship work, that he always put his family first, and that he would never consider running away. While gathering more information, Donald's sister discovered that he had been seeing a woman named Danielle. This revelation shifted the police's focus. They began to consider the possibility that Donald had left to escape his toxic relationship with Jennifer and was now with Danielle. Based on these details, the police concluded that Donald might have left to pursue happiness and would eventually return. Donald's sister refused to give up. She printed flyers and distributed them widely. Although the search yielded no results, it prompted the police to take further action. They noted that Donald had not committed any crimes or made any bank transactions since his disappearance. Additionally, his cell phone had not been used. These details led the police to suspect that he had not simply run away. Police began piecing together a timeline of events from the day he went missing. However, witness testimonies were inconsistent, making it impossible to determine the exact time of his disappearance. Donald's boss shared an intriguing story about him. According to the boss, Donald was determined to repair his relationship with Danielle. However, he discovered that Danielle was pregnant with another man's child. Although her relationship with the baby's father had ended, Danielle chose to keep the baby and was navigating the challenges of motherhood. Donald, who often confided in his boss, revealed just days before his disappearance that he wanted to end his toxic relationship with Jennifer and was considering starting a family with Danielle. Donald's sudden disappearance left his workplace baffled. He stopped showing up to work, didn't contact anyone, and ignored all attempts to reach him. This behavior was completely out of character for Donald, who was known for being responsible and punctual. He had recently been promoted and was putting more effort into his job, making it hard to believe he would abandon everything without explanation. Hoping to find Donald safe, the police went to Danielle's house. However, Danielle told them she hadn't seen or been able to contact him. She became very distressed when the police informed her of his disappearance. Danielle confirmed that both she and Donald had wanted to reconcile and that she had been waiting for him. She fully cooperated with the investigation, providing an alibi that was verified, ruling her out as a suspect. The police explored various scenarios to uncover a motive for Donald's disappearance, but found no explanation or trace of him. As time passed, the likelihood of finding him alive grew slim. On November 25, 2008, Jennifer gave birth to a son. Around the same time, the police obtained a search warrant for Donald's home. What they found in the master bedroom was disturbing. The room smelled strongly of cleaning products, and the bed appeared unusually clean, as though it had been scrubbed with a strong solution. The mattress and sheets were brand new, and the wall behind the headboard had also been scrubbed. However, only certain areas of the room had been cleaned. The wallpaper on one wall was noticeably faded and white, in stark contrast to the rest of the room, which was dusty and cluttered. Jennifer claimed she had cleaned the room to prepare for her son's birth, but her explanation didn't add up. Only one wall had been cleaned, while the rest of the house remained messy. Forensic experts examined the scene and found microscopic drops of blood. When questioned, Jennifer admitted there might be blood in the room, explaining that her 3 young children often fought and could have injured themselves, causing nosebleeds. She claimed her cleaning efforts were simply part of maintaining the room. However, her explanation raised doubts. Why had she focused on cleaning just one wall while leaving the rest of the house untouched? It seemed clear she had attempted to hide evidence and was now trying to mislead the investigation. Despite their suspicions, the police couldn't get Jennifer to confess. The police decided to question her children, who provided important details about the night Donald went missing. The teens mentioned that their mother had slept in the bedroom with their father that night. Later, they were awakened by the sound of someone running on the first floor. When they got up to investigate, they discovered that the back door of the house was wide open, which was unusual for their family. The children admitted they did not fully understand what had happened. Their mother, Jennifer, avoided discussing the incident. However, their testimony supported Jennifer's alibi, suggesting that she was unlikely to be involved in Donald's disappearance. The police then shifted their focus to other suspects, particularly Michael. He had a clear motive, as his girlfriend Jennifer had recently reconciled with Donald, her ex-husband. Several neighbors reported seeing Michael's pickup truck near Donald's house that evening. Michael was arrested and questioned, but the police obtained no useful information from him. He was later released, though he remained the prime suspect in the case. A significant breakthrough in the investigation occurred on December 23, when a random witness contacted the police station to report an unusual discovery. While walking his dog, the witness noticed the animal chewing on something. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a wallet containing Donald's ID. Authorities quickly responded and noted that the discovery site was near Michael's mother's house. This prompted the police to conduct a thorough search of the surrounding area. During their search, they found a baseball bat and several other items along the road. Based on these findings, the investigation was expanded to include the area near Michael's mother's home. A nearby field drew the attention of the police. After approximately an hour of searching through bushes, police found a camouflage tarp concealed beneath layers of leaves and branches. Something was wrapped inside. When they opened it, they discovered a body, its head encased in a plastic bag, wrapped in the tarp. Tattoos on the body allowed police to identify it as Donald Clark. The cause of death was determined to be multiple blunt force traumas to the head. One detail stood out to investigators: Donald was wearing pajamas. This finding contradicted Jennifer's earlier claim that Donald had gone to work. It appeared that he had been killed while sleeping in bed. Michael and Jennifer were preparing to celebrate Christmas together when police arrested them. Jennifer showed no signs of grief over her ex-husband's death and seemed content with her life with Michael. However, during a subsequent interrogation, Jennifer completely changed her story. She admitted that she had initially been sleeping in the same bed with Donald on the morning he went missing. At some point, Jennifer claimed, she awoke to find Michael standing over Donald, holding something in his hand. Terrified, Jennifer panicked and ran to her son's room, locking the door from the inside. The commotion woke the children, and from inside the locked room, Jennifer said she could hear Michael beating Donald to death with a baseball bat. After the attack, Jennifer claimed that Michael knocked on the bedroom door and demanded her help cleaning the scene. She stated that she complied out of fear for her own safety, believing she might be his next victim. Jennifer accused Michael of being a manipulative and abusive person who had kept her under oppressive control. She admitted that they cleaned the bedroom walls with bleach and replaced the blood-stained sheets and mattress with new ones. Jennifer said she later helped Michael carry Donald's body to the car, where Michael wrapped Donald's head in a plastic bag to minimize the amount of blood left at the crime scene. Michael, however, provided a completely different account. He denied Jennifer's allegations and claimed that she had never truly ended their relationship. According to Michael, Jennifer wanted to reconcile with Donald only to obtain financial benefits from him. He maintained that he and Jennifer were still seeing each other regularly and stated that, on the night of the murder, Jennifer called him around 1 a.m., asking to meet for intimacy. Michael alleged that Jennifer used a flashlight to signal him when he arrived at the house, indicating it was safe to enter. She supposedly assured Michael that Donald would not be home. However, when Michael entered the house, he claimed he found Donald asleep in the bedroom. Jennifer took an aluminum baseball bat from the closet and repeatedly struck Donald in the head. She then begged Michael to help dispose of the body and clean up the blood. Feeling he had no choice, Michael agreed. He later claimed that Jennifer was a dangerous manipulator who had controlled him throughout their relationship. Michael admitted to helping move the body out of town and scattering Donald's belongings in various locations. However, he kept Donald's cell phone. They used it to send text messages to Jennifer, pretending Donald was still alive. After conflicting interviews, both were arrested and charged with the premeditated murder of Donald Clark. Police believed they had planned the crime together. Michael was also charged with planting evidence to mislead the investigation. Jennifer's lawyers immediately contested the charges, arguing that she was 9 months pregnant at the time and unlikely to have beaten a grown man to death without assistance. Facing the possibility of the death penalty, Michael opted for a plea bargain with the prosecution. He admitted to complicity in planning the murder, destroying evidence, and obstructing the investigation. In exchange for his testimony against Jennifer, he received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The trial, delayed several times, finally began on January 31, 2011. The prosecution's star witness was Michael. He testified that on the night of the murder, Jennifer had called him, saying she wanted to leave Donald. Michael initially refused to help. Later, Jennifer called again, saying she had packed her bags and needed to be picked up. When Michael arrived, Jennifer attacked Donald and killed him with a baseball bat. Michael also revealed that Jennifer had threatened to cut ties with him if he didn't help cover up the crime and dispose of the body, which prompted his involvement. Several witnesses described Jennifer as argumentative and confrontational. After less than an hour of deliberation, the jury found Jennifer Clark guilty on all counts, including murder and tampering with evidence. She was sentenced to life in prison plus 60 years. Both defendants are currently serving sentences in state prisons. All of Jennifer's appeals have been denied. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Esmeralda Riches. Esmeralda Riches was born on August 23, 2006. Little is known about her childhood, but it is understood that she grew up in a loving family with her older sister. The family ran a small supermarket, where Esmeralda spent most of her time before attending the Agricultural Polytechnic Institute. She aspired to pursue higher education and dreamed of a modeling career, which she often showcased on social media. Esmeralda has an attractive appearance, giving her a great chance of success in this field. Esmeralda regularly shares funny and dancing videos on her social media, clearly enjoying her online presence and being in front of the camera. Her friends describe her as cheerful and kind, always ready to help others, which makes her popular. Unlike most teenagers, Esmeralda preferred to stay at home and invite her friends over rather than go out to various places. However, in the weeks leading up to the tragic incident, she suddenly began spending more time with her friends outside the house. This change in behavior confused her mother and sister. Her sister even suggested to their mother that they set some boundaries for Esmeralda, but her mother thought this was typical teenage behavior and did not see it as a cause for concern. However, the real problem was not her friends but her teacher, 30-year-old John Kelly Martinez. John had begun his teaching career after passing his teacher exam and started his probationary period in June 2022 at the academy where Esmeralda was in her final year. He initially taught mathematics but later volunteered to teach physical education, working with all groups, including Esmeralda's class. At that time, John was married with 2 daughters. He was known to be responsible and considerate, getting along with most of the students, and he was especially close to Esmeralda. At first, John and Esmeralda's relationship was merely that of a teacher and student. However, over time, John developed a special interest in her and gained her trust. One day during recess, John sat down next to Esmeralda and her friends and began asking strange questions, such as who the girls lived with, whether they had boyfriends. Unfortunately, the students did not notice John's strange behavior. Soon, he began inviting Esmeralda to meet him outside of school, often bringing other students along to avoid attracting attention. On February 12, 2023, John planned to go for a walk along the beach that evening with his nephew and 3 of Esmeralda's friends. However, since Esmeralda's parents did not allow her to go out at night, she was worried that her mother would not permit her to join them. To resolve this issue, she asked John to pick her up and help convince her mother. John agreed and arrived at Esmeralda's house around 7:30 p.m. in his black Honda, accompanied by his nephew and 3 friends. They went inside to talk to Esmeralda's mother about allowing her to go for a walk to a nearby horse show. At first, her mother was hesitant. However, after considering that Esmeralda would be with her teacher and classmates, Esmeralda's mother finally agreed to let her go. She did not know that this decision would have serious consequences for her daughter. That evening, Esmeralda's father returned home from church and found that Esmeralda was missing. When he asked his wife where she was, Esmeralda's mother explained that she had allowed Esmeralda to go for a walk. Esmeralda's father became angry, but she assured him that Esmeralda was with her teacher and classmates. As the night wore on and it became 11 p.m., Esmeralda still had not returned. Esmeralda's father called her, and surprisingly, she answered immediately, saying that she was on her way back from the beach and would be home in 10 minutes. Her father went outside to wait for her because she did not have her keys. A few minutes later, Esmeralda arrived home, accompanied by a friend and John. After seeing the girls off, John left immediately. Esmeralda's parents found her looking worried and pale, almost too weak to walk. Her friend helped her into the room and laid her down. Worried about her condition, her mother asked if Esmeralda had been drinking. Esmeralda replied that she had only had a sip of wine, which upset her mother. Esmeralda's father began scolding her for coming home late. During the argument, Esmeralda got up to go to the bathroom. Her mother then noticed a red stain. When her mother asked about it, Esmeralda said that she had just started her period. Her mother found this strange because she believed her daughter had finished her period a few days earlier. Nevertheless, she chose not to question the matter further. On the morning of February 13th, Esmeralda sent a text message to her friend asking for help, saying that she was bleeding. Around 6 a.m., Esmeralda's mother noticed that her daughter had not yet woken up for school. She knocked on Esmeralda's bedroom door, expecting her to wake up, but there was no answer. Worried, her parents entered the room and were horrified to find it empty and the bed covered in blood. They rushed into the bathroom and discovered Esmeralda. When they ran closer to check, her parents found that Esmeralda was dead. Overwhelmed with grief, they called the police. The police arrived, and around 8 a.m., Esmeralda's body was taken to the National Institute of Forensic Medicine for an autopsy to determine the cause of death. Her family was shocked, not knowing the details, but they suspected that something terrible had happened the night she went out. They discovered several text messages on Esmeralda's phone to her friend, indicating that a hard object had been inserted into her genitals, along with a voice message asking for help. At the time, the family was unaware of Esmeralda's relationship with John, but they quickly identified him as the prime suspect, prompting an investigation into the events of that night. The parents of 3 teenage girls who were with Esmeralda that night turned over their cell phones to the police to assist in the investigation. The police found several text messages from Esmeralda's friend, who drove her home, indicating that Esmeralda had begun bleeding from the 5 pills John had provided to induce an abortion. Esmeralda's friends urged her to go to the hospital, but she refused. Text messages showed that she had passed out several times while in John's car on the way home. The girls' phones also displayed messages from John asking about Esmeralda's condition. On the morning of Tuesday, February 14th, John was arrested and taken to the police station as the prime suspect in Esmeralda's death. The Department of Education suspended him for 90 days without pay to allow the investigation to proceed. During the search of John's home, his nephew was also arrested for attempting to conceal clothing, specifically the shirt, pants, and shoes that John had been wearing that night. Meanwhile, the chief prosecutor interviewed the 3 girls who were with Esmeralda. Their testimony was crucial for the police in piecing together the events of that night. They reported that they initially drove around the area, but at some point, John stopped at a store where he bought some beer and pills. When he returned to the car, he told Esmeralda to move from the back seat to the front. They then drove over 60 kilometers to the beach. John poured beer into a thermos and added some unidentified pills before giving them to Esmeralda. She indicated that she did not know what was in the thermos besides the beer. When they reached the beach, everyone got out of the car except for John and Esmeralda. After about half an hour, John called the group to say it was time to head back. On the way, Esmeralda asked to stop at a gas station so she could use the restroom. When her friends joined her, they noticed that her clothes were covered in blood. Everyone rushed to help Esmeralda. The gas station manager saw the situation and informed John of what was happening, causing him to panic and say that they might be in trouble and needed to take Esmeralda home. Her friends decided to buy her a new outfit. As they drove to Esmeralda's house a few miles away, they needed to stop at a friend's house to change Esmeralda's clothes again. The prosecutor's office obtained surveillance camera footage from the gas station where the girls said they had stopped that night. The video confirmed that the car had indeed stopped there, and the manager corroborated the girls' claim. A few days later, forensic experts examined the area and found traces of human blood where the girls had indicated. Police also discovered another stop at a pharmacy at 10:21 p.m., where they obtained surveillance camera footage and John's purchase receipt. The receipts showed that he had purchased water, medicine, and disposable towels for the woman. While the investigation was still ongoing, Esmeralda's funeral was held. Friends and family said their final goodbyes, remembering her as a fun-loving and loving young woman. Her sister stood by the coffin, deeply saddened. Esmeralda was buried in the city cemetery according to Christian tradition. During the burial, her parents expressed deep sorrow at their loss. They lamented that their daughter had not confided in them about her troubles or sought help, believing that if she had, she might still be alive. Esmeralda's sister mentioned that she had frequently asked Esmeralda about her relationship with the teacher, but Esmeralda always denied any relationship. Their father stated that he had never met John before that tragic night and insisted that if he had been home, he would have prevented this situation from occurring. There are many theories about Esmeralda's death. Some believe she died of a heart attack, while others think it was due to blood loss from the abortion pill that John gave her after their encounter. These speculations were put to rest when the autopsy results were released. The report revealed that Esmeralda died from a ruptured vagina, which resulted in severe bleeding and hemorrhagic shock due to the abuse. The hemorrhagic shock eventually damaged Esmeralda's heart, preventing it from pumping enough blood. The doctor who performed the autopsy insisted on conducting toxicology tests to rule out pregnancy. At the time of her death, her family was confident that the results would be negative, believing that Esmeralda and John's encounter that night was their first and last. The family's attorney stated that regardless of the test results, they would seek a more thorough investigation. Esmeralda's family conducted their own tests, which returned different results than those of the state medical examiner based on evidence collected by the police on February 20th. As a result, the prosecutor's office sought to charge John and also requested the arrest of his nephew, Robiel Murillo Martinez, as an accomplice. The prosecution's theory was that John drugged Esmeralda that night to assault her, causing injuries that eventually led to her death hours later. Rubiel allegedly knew about the incident. However, the attorneys for John and his nephew argued that the prosecutors did not have enough evidence to hold both men in custody and requested their release. The defense attempted to blame Esmeralda's parents for her death, claiming they were angry that Esmeralda had been with John and his nephew that night. After reviewing the evidence presented at trial, the judge ordered John to be held in a correctional rehabilitation center for 12 months before the trial. Rubiel was required to report regularly to the police station. Additionally, the girls who were with Esmeralda that night were summoned to assess their involvement and potential punishment. This court decision helped to defuse tensions, but the lawyer warned that Esmeralda's body might need to be exhumed for further forensic examination. A few days later, the case was again thrust into the spotlight when an audio recording, allegedly made by one of John's daughters, began circulating online. In this recording, the daughter defended her father, claiming that Esmeralda was not abused because she willingly got into John's car. Meanwhile, John's wife faced a separate scandal after she sold her husband's car for about $14,000 shortly after his arrest. On March 28, the prosecutor's office confirmed that John's wife had sold the car and expected to receive the remaining payment later. Police also seized a handgun that had been sold to John by a woman. John's wife was arrested on suspicion of involvement in the crime and concealing evidence, but was released hours later due to a lack of evidence against her. The investigation continues. In the following months, police worked to gather evidence to confirm John's involvement in Esmeralda's death. During a second search of John's home, they discovered a box of birth control pills containing levonorgestrel, the same active ingredient found in Esmeralda's body. Additionally, brown women's pants, a dark blue blouse, and a white napkin were collected from the house. Several pieces of blue plastic bags and other items were collected and sent for forensic examination. Subsequent analysis determined that the clothing belonged to Esmeralda. On November 24, 2023, judge ordered that John be tried as the sole defendant in the case concerning Esmeralda's death. The judge dismissed the charges of illegal possession of a weapon, leaving him to be tried only for the charges of deprivation of life and abuse related to Esmeralda. A judge from the Superior Court will decide John's sentence. In contrast, all charges against Rubio Murillo Martinez were dismissed due to insufficient evidence. The prosecution and Esmeralda's family lawyers have expressed their intention to appeal this decision. The trial was originally scheduled to begin on January 9, 2024, but was postponed. The hearing finally began on January 15, with the press barred from attending. The hearing commenced with the reading of the indictment, followed by testimony from witnesses. Esmeralda's parents were the first to speak. They expressed their deep love for their daughter and their immense grief at losing her. Esmeralda's father directed his comments at John, emphasizing that John had relied on his role as an educator and child advocate. After the emotional testimony from Esmeralda's family, John spoke. He tries to play the victim, admitting to being intimate with Esmeralda but insisting it was consensual. He also claimed that he had brought her home alive and unharmed. The prosecution argued that Esmeralda died as a result of fatal injuries inflicted by John. To support their case, the prosecution presented 40 pieces of evidence, including witness statements, audio and video material collected during the investigation, and photos and videos of Esmeralda with John, as well as Esmeralda's autopsy report. After all the evidence was presented, the prosecution and Esmeralda's family attorney requested a prison sentence for John. They also attempted to add an additional charge, alleging that he had committed the crime of torturing a minor. However, this charge was dismissed by the judge. On March 14, 2024, the court found John Kelly Martinez guilty and sentenced him to 20 years in prison. He was ordered to pay Esmeralda's family $33,000 in restitution, along with a $3,400 fine. After the verdict, John apologized to Esmeralda's parents and the public for his actions. Although no sentence could bring Esmeralda back, the verdict brought relief to her family. They expressed their gratitude to everyone involved in the investigation and trial and stated that they were satisfied with the outcome. Esmeralda's mother described her daughter as a cheerful and happy girl. After her death, her mother tried to call her many times, struggling to accept the loss. Esmeralda's father used to wake her up every morning, but now he will never have that chance again. Both of Esmeralda's parents pray for the strength to overcome their grief, but they find it difficult to forgive John. Esmeralda's tragic story has deeply affected many people. Her life ended, highlighting the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries in the teacher-student relationship. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Stott family. In June 2013, the staff at a medical center in Springfield, Missouri, faced a challenging situation when they admitted 24-year-old Sarah Stott. She was in critical condition, losing consciousness and crying out in pain when she regained awareness. Doctors discovered she had a brain hemorrhage and kidney failure, causing her organs to function erratically. They struggled to understand her rapidly deteriorating state. The fight for Sarah's life lasted several days until they received an anonymous tip. The caller revealed that the Stott family had been plagued by mysterious illnesses for a year, which had already claimed the lives of Sarah's father, Mark, and her brother, Sean. Both had died without receiving medical care, and now it seems Sarah was next. Fortunately, she was admitted to the medical center, giving her a chance at survival. The police began investigating the unusual illnesses affecting the Stott family, suspecting it was not just a coincidence. The family comprised 6 members: Mark, Diane, and their children Sean and 3 daughters Sarah, Rachel, and the 9-year-old girl. Mark Stott, born in St. Louis in 1951, he met Diane while studying in Texas. Despite their differences, they quickly found common interests and began dating. Mark was optimistic and artistic, performing in a band, while Diane was more reserved and introverted. Their relationship progressed rapidly, leading to an unplanned pregnancy, after which they decided to marry. Following the birth of Sean, Diane pursued her education, graduated from nursing school, and began working in a hospital's cardiology department. In contrast, Mark became a stay-at-home dad, managing household responsibilities and caring for the children. It appeared that Diane prioritized her career, striving to provide for the family. To seek better job opportunities, they relocated to Springfield, Missouri, a tranquil town ideal for raising children. This town was also Diane's hometown, conservative and religious, making her feel safe and secure. In the years that followed, they welcomed 3 daughters. To outsiders, they appeared to be the ideal family, but behind the appearance, they faced significant challenges. Sean, their son, struggled with health issues from a young age and was diagnosed with autism during his school years, which required special support. Despite the father's efforts, the daughters also experienced learning difficulties in school, particularly Sarah. The family's biggest challenge was financial. They simply did not have enough money to support their growing household. One income was insufficient to meet their needs, and they needed to find a new home because their current one lacked space. Mark occasionally helped the family's finances by taking on odd jobs, such as bartending. However, he primarily focused on caring for the children. In his free time, he pursued his passion for music, writing songs and playing various instruments. He eventually began performing with a musical group, which generated some income, but it was still not enough for their large family. Despite their struggles, they seemed prepared to face their challenges together, until April 8, 2012, the day after Mark's birthday. In the family home lay the lifeless body of Mark. His wife reported that he had died from a mysterious illness resembling the flu, which progressed rapidly. She stayed by his side to comfort him, but despite her efforts, Mark's condition worsened significantly. His body even appeared unusual, with his skin taking on a yellowish tint. Diane mentioned that on the day Mark died, he experienced a seizure, something he had never had before. She attributed this to his age. When the seizure occurred, she wanted to take Mark to the hospital, but he insisted that he wanted to stay home and rest. Despite his wishes, she began preparing to leave. By the time she was ready, she found him unresponsive. 45 minutes after the seizure, she called emergency services. Upon a quick examination, nothing seemed suspicious, and the death certificate attributed his passing to natural causes related to his age. During this time, their son Sean was very concerned about his father's health. He documented all of Mark's symptoms on social media and questioned the natural causes of his death. Diane requested that her husband be cremated, and his ashes were scattered over a local lake near the church. Mark's death shocked everyone. He was a strong, healthy, making his sudden passing all the more puzzling. 5 months later, on September 2012, the police were called to another home for similar reasons. This larger house was more suitable for the family, Diane lived there with her children after selling their previous home and receiving an insurance payout following her husband's death. On that day, Diane found her 26-year-old son, Sean, dead in his room. His death mirrored the flu that had claimed his father's life. After her husband's passing, Diane became more proactive and took Sean to the doctor when he started showing symptoms. However, the doctors found nothing alarming, only a water imbalance. Despite Sean's worsening condition, Diane stopped taking him to the doctor, claiming he refused medical help and felt uncomfortable, which she attributed to his autism. The night before he died, Sean seemed to improve, leading Diane to believe that his mysterious illness was fading. She went to church with her daughters to pray for him. When they returned, they found Sean unresponsive, having apparently tried to get out of bed and fallen, leaving a pool of blood on the floor. His sudden death shocked everyone. Sean worked at a center for people with disabilities and was known for his positive and friendly nature. Like his father, Sean was cremated, and his ashes were scattered over a lake. About 9 months later, in June 2013, Sarah, the eldest daughter of the family, was hospitalized with symptoms similar to those that had caused the deaths of her brother and father. The police arrived at the hospital 2 days after Sarah was admitted in critical condition. While doctors were doing everything they could to save her, they could not provide the police with any specific information. They were still trying to identify the cause of her unusual illness, which resembled the flu, but it was concerning that both her kidneys and brain had failed. The medical staff conducted several tests, and there was an unspoken fear that Sarah might have been poisoned. The police were contacted by an anonymous caller from the church that the Stott family attended, where Diane had played the organ for many years. The pastor suspected that these events were not mere coincidences and feared that there was a murderer at work, so he decided to call the police. He shared his concerns that Mark's death and Sarah's worsening condition might be connected. The pastor found Mark's death particularly suspicious, noting that he had been healthy right before he died under similar circumstances. He was beginning to suspect Diane's involvement in these tragic incidents. During this time, Diane claimed that her daughter was simply ill while she acted like a grieving widow, a mother mourning loved ones who were dying under mysterious circumstances. This behavior helped her gain significant support from the religious community. However, the pastor suspected that Diane was deliberately maintaining this facade to avoid uncomfortable questions. When Diane last visited her daughter in the hospital, her behavior changed dramatically. The nurses noted that she was in a good mood. She joked and talked more about an upcoming trip to Florida than about her daughter's serious health issues, despite the doctor's alarming prognosis. They were uncertain if the girl would survive this mysterious illness. The mother's apparent indifference only heightened the authorities' suspicions against her. Diane was invited to voluntarily come to the police station for a discussion. On June 20, 2013, she arrived at the police department. By then, Sarah's condition had stabilized somewhat, but none of the medical tests revealed any toxins in her body. It appeared that any harmful substances had been completely processed and left no trace. The detectives knew they had to be very careful when speaking with a potential poisoner. Meanwhile, they couldn't perform many tests on Sarah due to her worsening condition. They continued to hope that Sarah would recover and provide information for the investigation. The detectives aimed to understand the events leading up to the victims' illnesses and gather clues about the causes of their deteriorating health. The situation was similar to what had happened with Sean. On that tragic day, Diane had gone to church with her other daughters, and upon returning home, she noticed that her eldest daughter, Sarah, was very ill. Prior to this, Sarah had been experiencing mild symptoms similar to those of her brother and father, so Diane did not panic initially. Diane believed they would be able to help Sarah when she returned home, and she eventually sent Sarah to the hospital. The first thing Diane questioned was whether her daughter had attempted to end her own life. Sarah had bipolar disorder, which meant she might have harmed herself. Diane reviewed all the medications available to her daughter and insisted that Sarah had tried to end her life multiple times in the past. It seemed as if Diane was desperately trying to persuade the police to believe her perspective. The officers did not inform Diane that they were also investigating the deaths of Mark and Sean, as they wanted to avoid alarming a potential suspect. During this time, Diane acted unusually. When responding to questions, she mentioned that Sarah had been a difficult child, was struggling to find work, and was not doing well in school, all while tuition bills were piling up. This seemed like an attempt to justify her actions, which felt out of place given that her daughter was fighting for her life in the hospital. Additionally, Diane expressed resentment toward her husband, who rarely worked and spent his free time on leisure activities. The detectives simply listened as she continued to share her thoughts and feelings. Diane acknowledged that she had always viewed Sarah as a problem because of her bipolar disorder. Despite this, Sarah continued to live with the family and had no intention of moving out. Diane revealed that for a long time, she even wished that Sarah would end her own life. Diane insisted multiple times that she did not harm her loved ones. Eventually, she made an unexpected confession to the detectives. She stated that her husband and children had been drinking antifreeze. This revelation was significant because antifreeze poisoning is very dangerous, and its symptoms can mimic those of various other chemicals, making it hard to identify. It leads to a slow and painful death. Diane confessed that she had even drunk antifreeze herself, having seen her family engage in it for some unknown reason. Of course, the detectives did not believe these absurd stories. Suspicions quickly started to be confirmed when they checked her browser search history. It turned out that well before Mark's death, she had begun searching for information on the signs and methods of poisoning, including antifreeze. She was clearly selecting the most effective and discreet means for murder, considering various medications, minerals, and essential oils that have a suppressive impact on the body. Several search queries were very provocative, for example, how to kill your husband, or how people with bipolar disorder commit and end one's own life. This indicated premeditated murder long before Mark died. When asked about all this during a follow-up meeting, Diane denied any guilt. She admitted that her husband's death did not happen as originally claimed. When the seizure occurred, she was sure that Mark would not be saved. According to Diane, she did this because she hated her husband. Everyone described the man as very good-natured. Probably, hatred stemmed from the couple's approach to the family budget. Diane simply could no longer handle the burdens at work, but she could never wait for her husband's help. She felt the same kind of hatred toward her son Sean. She could not bear to look at him. Sean was just seeking understanding and warmth from his mother, but instead, she just threw him out of the room. Every time Sean came in, he sensed that something was off, especially when he investigated his father's illness. When Mark died, she realized that she could no longer tolerate her ailing son, so she began to treat him badly every day. Diane claimed that it took only a couple of days for his body to succumb, but that was a lie. The boy was agonizingly dying for more than a week before he finally left this world. Now her attention and dissatisfaction focused on her eldest daughter, whom Diane considered the main problem in the family. Sarah was spending too much money on her education, but it was doomed to fail due to her lack of talent. Sarah dreamed of becoming a French translator, took out a student loan, and soon after graduating from college, she had to start repaying it, but there were no job prospects for Sarah, and her mother refused to pay her debts. Diane hated Sarah for not being able to find the job and solve her financial problems. For days before Sarah ended up in the hospital, her mother started adding antifreeze to her food. In the police station, Diane confessed that she sent her daughter to the hospital so quickly because she could no longer bear what was happening in her suffering. Naturally, Diane felt no pity. In reality, she had been preparing drinks in advance that were almost half antifreeze. Diane had stashed bottles of cola that could kill up to 30 people at once, according to experts. All of this was stored in the refrigerator to methodically poison her family, which seemed very alarming, especially considering that there were 2 other daughters in the house. However, Diane was not afraid that her younger daughter would accidentally take this drink, as she plans included the girl murder right after Sarah's. But to convict Diane, tangible evidence was needed. Despite the cremation of her husband and son, some fragments of Mark and Sean could still be found. After conducting autopsies, detectives suggested examining them to see if the deadly substance left traces in their bodies. Tests showed the presence of ethylene glycol, one of the main components of antifreeze. Before arresting the poisoner, the police decided to find out if she had an accomplice, as it would be difficult to carry out everything alone. It is hard to imagine how the suspect managed to keep all her close ones unaware of her intentions. The detectives arrested Diane without informing her and then questioned her second daughter, Rachel. They told Rachel that her mother had confessed to poisoning Sarah, which made Rachel extremely anxious. It was evident that she knew more than she was admitting. The detectives wanted to speak with Rachel to gain more insight into the family's situation. Even before Diane confessed, Rachel had been acting oddly, laughing and joking inappropriately about the deaths of family members, but she didn't confess to anything. As suspicions grew, the police repeatedly searched the Stott family home and discovered a diary belonging to Rachel, which proved to be highly informative. In one concerning entry, Rachel reflected that soon both her father and brother would die. She comforted herself with the thought of getting money and her father's car. Alarmingly, this entry was dated 6 months before Mark's death, indicating that Rachel was aware of her mother's troubling intentions and did not try to stop her or warn anyone. It appeared she was content with the idea of her entire family dying soon. When Rachel was shown the diary, she was clearly taken aback. She quickly broke down and admitted that she had been working with her mother, Diane, who was the poisoner, from the very start. Their collaboration began when Rachel assisted Diane in researching methods and poisons online. They discovered that antifreeze, which is sold in stores with a bitter additive to deter accidental consumption, could be purchased online for their malicious plan. Diane would prepare poisoned meals and drinks, which Rachel would then deliver to her father, brother, and even sister. In her confession, Rachel stated that they poisoned each family member up to 3 times a day. Rachel had the closest relationship with her mother and had always been the favored daughter. Just like Diane, who resented the others and viewed them as burdens. Together, they decided to eliminate the rest of the family and start a new life. A month after Mark's death, Rachel shocked her family's friends by posting on social media, "I think I haven't seen my mother so relaxed in a long time." This suggested that they were content with the outcome. Rachel shared that they had discussed each murder in detail and agreed that Mark needed to die. However, she was uncertain about Sean. She believed he didn't have to be killed and could instead be placed in a specialized treatment facility permanently. Rachel even argued with her mother about Sean, initially opposing the idea of his death but eventually conceding that it would be better to eliminate him. It seemed like a collaboration between mother and daughter in their plans. Rachel mentioned that she was surprised by Sarah's poisoning. She thought the reasons were not financial or related to deaths, but rather stemmed from a simple argument. Sarah often clashed with their mother, who found her very annoying. Regarding the 9-year-old girl, Rachel made vague remarks implying that the girl was also seen as a burden, which contributed to the desire to eliminate her as well. Diane was informed of Rachel's confession and encouraged to tell the complete truth. She agreed to do so. According to Diane, her resentment towards her husband began because he was emotionally distant and did not engage with her. She was also frustrated by his lavish spending and inability to support the family financially. Diane accused him of both physical and verbal abuse, as well as domestic violence, but these allegations were not corroborated by anyone who knew him well. In an attempt to defend herself, she claimed he had been unfaithful. However, none of Mark's close friends, whom he saw almost daily, supported these claims. Even Rachel's diary noted that their father was a devoted family man, suggesting he would harm himself before harming anyone else. Although Rachel and Diane expressed ongoing feelings of grievance, detectives believed the motive for the murders was more straightforward. Specifically, life insurance policies had been taken out on each family member, with benefits paid upon Mark's death. This would allow the widow to buy a larger, more comfortable home, marking the start of their deceptive plan. Rachel had also arranged other insurance policies that she intended to collect. Her diary revealed her concerns about the situation, which was closely examined during the hearings. Ultimately, Diane confessed that they had decided to take Sarah to the hospital while not doing the same for the other two victims because Rachel simply wanted to prevent anyone else from dying in the new house. They weren't worried about Sarah's passing. Instead, they viewed a dying loved one as a burden, just like the others. Rachel explained her behavior by sharing her deep anxieties related to her deceased brother. She vividly recalled the traumatic image of him lying on the floor, blood at his mouth, with cold, pale hands and glassy eyes. Following this, she moved into his room and often wrote in her diary about her heightened anxiety and the nightmares she experienced, in which Sean appeared. Both Rachel and Diane were arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and they were denied bail. The Lutheran Redeemer Church attended by the Stott family issued a supportive statement on behalf of all parishioners during this challenging time. Interestingly, although the pastor had reported his suspicions to the police and initiated the letter of support, he continued to pray for their souls. Rachel accepted responsibility for her actions and agreed to testify against her mother, admitting to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of attempted second-degree murder. She received 2 life sentences but could apply for parole after 42 years. During her sentencing, Rachel apologized to her sister Sarah, who survived the poisoning and underwent extensive rehabilitation to learn to walk and talk again. Later, Rachel requested a reduction in her sentence, seeking a retrial. She claimed she was intimidated by her male attorney and had not been given a psychiatric evaluation, highlighting her mental health issues. However, her appeal was denied in 2018, and she did not pursue any further efforts to lessen her sentence. Diane Stott was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Throughout the trial, she used vague language and did not fully admit her guilt. She received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In one of her final interviews, Diane claimed she was not responsible for Mark's death, attributing it to his addiction to alcohol and banned substance. She stated that he had connections with dangerous people, which led to his suffering. At that time, she had such strong feelings of hatred toward her husband that she did not want to help him. When Mark died, she felt relieved. However, there was no evidence to support Diane's claims about Mark's dependency. Her new narrative contradicted diary entries and statements from Rachel, leading others to doubt her. Sarah's life changed forever due to severe poisoning, and she will never fully recover. She now resides in a special care center and has a guardian. Sarah dreams of her late father and brother, believing they are like guardian angels watching over her. She has forgiven her mother and sister and does not hold any resentment toward them. Her strong faith keeps her devoted, and she spends a lot of time in church. Sarah hopes to achieve her dreams of becoming a French translator and visiting Paris. Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Williams. Amanda Williams was born on April 18, 1977, in Cleveland. She grew up in a large, religious family and was a member of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Amanda has 2 children who are the center of her life, and she also enjoys spending time with her grandchildren. In her community, she is a respected hairdresser and is active on social media, where she shares positive messages to inspire others. She emphasizes the importance of personal growth and encourages her followers to focus on their own development. The year 2023 is significant for Amanda. She celebrated the 25th anniversary of her hair salon, which has not only survived but thrived during that time. She has expanded her customer base and launched her own hair care line. Amanda is proud of the success of her hair salon. In her personal life, she currently lives with her fiancé, Terrell Edwards, who is 41. They have been together for 6 years. Terrell works at a hospital while also delivering groceries part-time. Their relationship has grown stronger, and they are engaged, sharing happy moments on social media, including a romantic dinner on Valentine's Day and a birthday trip to Las Vegas, where they attended a concert. Despite appearing happy on the surface, the couple is facing significant problems in their relationship. In October 2023, Amanda began to notice warning signs and considered ending the relationship. Although they were engaged, they decided to seek help from a marriage counselor. While Terrell was not in any legal trouble at the time, his family and friends reported a troubling past. They revealed that Terrell was arrested for assault in 2019 and was given a restraining order in 2020 after a woman accused him of stalking and threatening her. Friends reported that Amanda attempted to leave Terrell on the morning of October 9, 2023, at their home. Tensions were high, as Amanda had just returned from a cosmetic convention and was slow to respond to Terrell's texts. This led to an argument that lasted all day. In retaliation, Amanda disconnected the phone line, forcing Terrell to purchase a new SIM card. The couple continued arguing in the basement, away from Amanda's daughter and granddaughter, who were still upstairs. Amanda repeatedly asked Terrell to leave, and her daughter eventually called the police. A few minutes later, a police car arrived at their home. Once inside, police discovered Amanda's body with gunshot wounds. She was taken to the hospital by paramedics but died shortly afterward. Police detained Terrell for questioning. He described the incident, claiming that during the argument, Amanda attacked him, leaving him no choice but to defend himself and shoot her. Audio from a surveillance camera captured him explaining to police that Amanda had come upstairs with a knife. He recounted the incident, saying that Amanda grabbed his phone and smashed the screen with the knife. After throwing the phone aside, he said that Amanda chased him across the room. He jumped onto the bed, and when she lunged at him with the knife, he pulled a gun from under the mattress and fired. He claimed that he tried to calm her down and asked her to put the knife away, but his attempts were unsuccessful. Terrell was eventually released due to insufficient evidence to charge him. The county sheriff and prosecutors stated that the investigation is ongoing. They appealed to residents for support and encouraged anyone with information to come forward. The situation has devastated Amanda's family, who are determined to seek justice. Amanda's brother, who vowed to fight for justice, stressed that Amanda was loved by many. Meanwhile, Amanda's mother struggles to come to terms with her daughter's death, haunted by the thought that Amanda feared for her children in her final moments. Amanda's mother sought justice for her daughter, stating that Amanda did not deserve what had happened to her. Her brother wanted justice not only for Amanda but for every woman who has suffered domestic violence. The family's lawyer assured Amanda's mother that she had no reason to blame herself, as she was protecting her daughter. He promised that they would present all the evidence necessary to fully understand the crime, assuring her that justice would eventually be served. 23 days after Amanda Williams's death, the police released a statement indicating that they had submitted all relevant information to the chief magistrate. The magistrate decided to file charges in Amanda's case and issued an arrest warrant for Terrell Edwards, the suspect in the murder. The prosecutor concluded from the investigation that Terrell's claim of self-defense was, in fact, part of the charges of attempted aggravated murder, assault, and domestic violence. However, they were unable to locate him, prompting the police to ask him to contact them, which he did on November 3rd. He was later released on $1 million bail. Terrell Edwards's trial began 4 months later, on February 27, 2024. The prosecutor believed that the investigation had clarified the truth and that a jury would determine whether Terrell shot Amanda in self-defense or if it was premeditated murder. During the trial, the prosecutor claimed that Terrell shot Amanda 6 times with a revolver, killing her in her own bedroom. He pointed out that Amanda had asked Terrell to leave multiple times, but he refused to do so. The defense argued that Terrell acted out of fear for his life, believing it was self-defense and his only way out. The first witness was a forensic expert who testified that Amanda died from a gunshot wound. She explained that although multiple shots were fired, a single bullet could have caused the fatal wound. The jury viewed a video from Terrell's phone recorded that day, which captured the argument and the sound of gunshots. In the video, Amanda claimed she was defending herself, while Terrell urged her to calm down. The footage showed Amanda in their bedroom, holding a knife and demanding that Terrell leave her home. She then approached Terrell and grabbed his phone, while the recording continued to capture the gunshots. The prosecutor pointed out that in the video, Terrell does not ask Amanda to put down the knife or mention that he has a gun and is going to shoot. He further noted that later in the video, Terrell walks up to the bed where Amanda has a gun hidden under the mattress, while she remains away from him and does not approach. Terrell stated that he feared for his life and believed he had no choice but to shoot Amanda. During the court proceedings, Terrell discussed his relationship with Amanda, their plans to marry, and their experience with a family psychologist to prepare for marriage, describing their relationship as generally positive. However, on October 9, 2023, there was a heated argument between Terrell and Amanda, which was later described in court. While Terrell wanted to resolve their conflict, Amanda insisted that he leave. He noticed something was wrong with Amanda, noting her bloodshot eyes. Although he wanted to stay, Amanda warned him that if he remained, he should be cautious and vigilant. According to Terrell, he then went to the nightstand where Amanda kept 2 guns. He took the guns and carried them to his car. When he returned home, Amanda was on the phone with the police. He decided to pack up and leave. At that point, she was holding a knife, and Terrell began recording the incident on his phone. In court, he claimed that Amanda lunged at him with the knife, but the video showed her placing it on the railing. He couldn't remember everything but stated that at one point, she turned around, and their argument escalated when she grabbed the phone from his hand. Terrell then jumped onto the bed and grabbed a 3rd gun. Terrell recalled Amanda aggressively stabbing the phone screen with a knife as she approached him. In a panic, he grabbed a gun from under the mattress and shot Amanda multiple times. When asked why he did not alert her to the gun or ask her to stop, he claimed in his defense that he never intended to shoot her, he was trying to escape when she attacked. During cross-examination, Terrell's testimony changed. The attorney pointed out that the sound of the knife hitting the phone occurred after Terrell had already grabbed the gun. At that moment, Amanda's daughter ran into the room, and Terrell quickly took her out to protect her. He claimed that he did not want to hurt Amanda's daughter, so he prevented her from entering the room. The prosecutor noted that Amanda had put down the knife before approaching Terrell. However, the defense argued that Amanda could have retrieved the knife after Terrell stopped shooting. The medical examiner stated that Amanda's neck wound would have left her paralyzed, so she would not have been able to hold the knife. After all the evidence was presented, it was time for the jury to reach a verdict in the case against Terrell Edwards. Terrell Edwards was found guilty of murder, assault, and domestic violence. The verdict was announced the following week at the sentencing hearing. The judge reminded everyone to follow the rules of the courtroom and stated that the police were responsible for security. If anyone misbehaved, they were asked to turn off and put away their phones. Terrell insisted that he never intended to harm Amanda. He expressed his wish that Amanda loved him, but Amanda replied that their relationship could never be the same again. The prosecutor stressed that Amanda's daughter did not know about the couple's problems. A photo showed Amanda wearing a mask over her face when she was with her son. Amanda hid the abuse from her family. Although Terrell admitted to his actions, he maintained a different statement in court, claiming that he never harmed Amanda. The prosecutor sought a harsh sentence for Terrell Edwards. In court, Amanda's family, friends, and colleagues were deeply saddened. Simply saying that they would miss her did not begin to express the depth of their loss. During the hearing, Amanda's brother Joey Lewis expressed his deep feelings. Joey shared that they grew up together and that she was like a second mother to him, shaping who he is today. He described Amanda as an extraordinary person who always did the right thing. Joey criticized Terrell, calling him a wolf in sheep's clothing. He referred to Terrell as a clever manipulator who could turn any situation to his advantage. Joey felt unable to forgive Terrell for his actions, noting that if he were in Terrell's shoes, he would have made a better choice instead of following through with his original plan. Joey struggled to understand how Terrell could have acted so cruelly. He recalled a family dinner where Terrell asked for his blessing to marry Amanda, and Joey agreed. However, after recent events, he began to feel guilty about that decision. He was especially upset that Amanda's children had to witness everything that happened. Joey wanted Terrell locked up until Amanda's daughter was old enough to forgive him. At the end of the hearing, the judge commented that no amount of time could truly heal the wounds of this tragedy. Ultimately, Terrell Edwards was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole in 24 years. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Mindy Berenyi. Mindy Berenyi grew up in a small farming town in Antwerp, Ohio, in a middle-class family. Her mother, Shirley, met her future husband, Andy, while she was still in school. At the time, Andy was 18 and had completed his auto mechanic training, while Shirley was 17 and still in high school. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they married just a few months after meeting. Shortly after their marriage, Shirley discovered that she was pregnant by another man she had dated before meeting Andy. She had not been unfaithful to Andy, it was simply the result of a previous relationship. Shirley hesitated for a long time, but eventually, Andy accepted both her and the baby as his family. The couple stayed together for 15 years and had 3 children during their marriage. 2 of the children were Andy's, while the eldest was from Shirley's previous relationship. However, after 15 years of marriage, they decided to divorce. Shirley, feeling she could no longer cope as a single mother, gave up custody of all 3 children. The children went to live with Andy, their father. Mindy always loved her father. However, disturbing changes began to disrupt her life. When Mindy was about 9 years old, her father called her into his bedroom and asked her to give him a massage. Years later, Mindy realized this was the beginning of the abuse. At the time, she did not fully understand what was happening and complied, even though she felt something was wrong. She later recalled that it did not feel like a normal massage. Eventually, Mindy refused to go to her father's bedroom. From that point on, Andy's treatment of her became much harsher. Andy began to manipulate his children emotionally, insulting them and even resorting to physical violence. This caused Mindy's brothers to leave the house. Andy eventually remarried, which seemed to improve the strained family relationships, but nothing truly changed. He continued to exert tight control over Mindy, especially as she grew older. Like any teenager, Mindy wanted to spend time with her friends, but her father would not allow it. His behavior became increasingly controlling and manipulative. When Mindy got a job at a nearby McDonald's, Andy kept a close eye on her. He tracked the mileage on his car when she drove, frequently searched her room, and even recorded and listened to Mindy's phone conversations. When Andy was away from home, he turned off his phone to prevent his daughter from communicating with anyone without his supervision. She wanted to stay in touch with her friends and live like a normal teenager, but this angered her father. He would eavesdrop on Mindy's conversations and immediately disconnect her phone from the network if he heard something he disliked. He demanded complete obedience from her, but Mindy refused to comply. When Mindy turned 16, Andy's behavior became increasingly dangerous. He would grab and strangle her when she resisted his control. He would throw her around and beat her while trying to avoid leaving any evidence. The situation worsened when Andy discovered she was pregnant, although the identity of the father was unknown. Mindy was devastated, unable to imagine raising a child in such a hostile environment. Her father's abusive behavior had become unbearable, and she feared for her life and well-being. That same day, Mindy stormed into Andy's upstairs bedroom and grabbed a shotgun hanging on the wall. She then ran into the bathroom, intending to take her own life. Andy was not home at the time, but by the time Mindy changed her mind and decided to put the shotgun away to avoid her father's detection, it was too late. When Andy walked in and saw his daughter holding the gun, he immediately flew into a rage. Mindy later said she was terrified and thought she was in serious trouble. Andy turned away to close the door, saying he would deal with her right away. Moments later, a gunshot rang out. At approximately 4:16 p.m. on September 27th, Joni, Andy's second wife, called the police. When police arrived at the scene, they found Andy lying on the floor. Mindy claimed that she had acted in self-defense. According to Mindy, she had endured years of abuse, along with constant psychological pressure and total control from her abusive father, Andy, who would punish her for even the smallest mistakes. In an attempt to defend herself, she accidentally shot and killed her father. Lawyers accepted her testimony and planned to fight for her acquittal. However, a significant challenge was that Mindy rarely spoke about her struggles or the abuse she endured. Her father, Andy, had restricted her interactions with others, only allowing her to communicate with others when he was supervised. As a result, she had no opportunity to confide in her friends or anyone else about her situation. Additionally, there were no bruises or injuries on her body. This lack of evidence created serious obstacles to convincing the jury that this was indeed a case of self-defense. Shirley, Mindy's mother, supported her daughter's testimony. Mindy had repeatedly complained about her father's abusive behavior, but Shirley had dismissed each time as isolated incidents. Mindy would then reassure her mother that everything was fine, leading her to believe that her daughter was exaggerating. Now, Mindy claimed that her father had threatened her, and Shirley admitted that Andy had behaved similarly throughout their marriage. While at the police station, Shirley revealed that she had also suffered abusive behavior from her husband, which was the main reason for their divorce. However, she did not expect that Andy would use the same tactics on their daughter. The situation became even more complicated when Mindy faced information isolation. She was unable to socialize comfortably with others and could only occasionally spend a few minutes on the phone without Andy's supervision. Despite everything, Shirley supported her daughter. Andy's second wife, Joni, who had been married to him for 8 years, defended him. She described Andy as a loving husband and devoted father, raising 2 sons and doing his best for his ungrateful daughter, Mindy. She saw him as a decent man who was unfairly labeled a tyrant to justify the murder. According to Joni, Andy spent much of his free time with his children, often taking them to the nearby river to fish and boat. This account was supported by all of Andy's neighbors. Joni described her husband as a hardworking man who devoted his life to his family. Andy's relatives were steadfast in their support of him, insisting that he was never cruel or manipulative. From the beginning, they described Mindy as an insecure and disobedient child whose negative traits worsened as she grew older. They portrayed her as a pathological liar and a rebellious individual who frequently tried to run away from home and even stole her father's car several times. Andy also suspects that she may be using illegal substances. Concerned about her behavior, he believes that strict rules need to be put in place to deal with the situation. Andy's relatives claim that this was not an act of self-defense, but rather a brutal and calculated murder by Mindy. They allege that she killed her father, a man who did everything in his power to keep his daughter out of trouble. Joni reported that Andy had blocked Mindy's phone. This was because Mindy had been calling her friends frequently, often planning to run away. He later discovered that Mindy had been skipping work, which led him to periodically check her car's mileage to ensure she did not lose her job at McDonald's. Andy also began searching her room after suspecting that she was smoking. Based on these actions, Andy's behavior appeared consistent with that of a controlling yet concerned parent. In the months leading up to the murder, Joni kept a diary documenting many of Mindy's disturbing behaviors. Mindy was described as a rule breaker. Joni's diary recorded every attempt Mindy made to run away, which had happened 3 times in the past 2 months. The diary also described how Mindy spent days lying in bed, drinking, and being dishonest. Because of this behavior, her loved ones found it impossible to trust her. According to Joni, Mindy's behavior was so out of control that Joni feared for her own safety. She overheard Mindy say things to her father that made her feel extremely insecure. This behavior continued for years. According to Joni, Andy only lost his temper once. On that occasion, he grabbed Mindy by the neck and pushed her against a wall. However, it was clear that he had no intention of harming her. Joni categorically denied that there was any abuse toward Mindy. She also stated that she never heard Andy insult his daughter, call her worthless, emotionally pressure her, or humiliate her, as Mindy had described. Joni was home when Andy died. She noticed that Mindy was acting strangely throughout the day but did not think much of it. Everything changed when Joni heard a loud bang. She immediately ran downstairs and saw Mindy pointing a gun at her. Joni quickly retrieved the gun, and no one was hurt. At first, she thought Mindy was just trying to get attention. However, when she went into the kitchen, Joni saw Andy lying on the floor near the entrance through the open door. She called out to him, but he did not respond. When she got closer, she realized he was dead. Mindy killed her father, whom she had hated for years, seemingly without any particular reason. Joni claimed that Andy had always tried to support and protect Mindy from the hardships of life. When the police arrived at the scene, they arrested Mindy and took her to the sheriff's office, where she tearfully confessed to the murder. At the police station, Joni stated that the act was intentional. She believed Mindy was manipulative and untrustworthy. The lawyers sought to damage Andy's reputation, as it was the only way to prove Mindy's innocence. From the beginning, Joni believed that Mindy was trying to deceive everyone to avoid responsibility for her terrible crime. However, the lawyers argued that Mindy had suffered years of emotional and physical abuse and only acted in self-defense when she felt her life and the life of her unborn child was in danger. Mindy, who had recently found out she was pregnant, was terrified, believing that her father would kill her if he found out. Mindy's strongest supporter remained her mother, Shirley. The prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including a poem found in Mindy's notebook, which had been discovered in her nightstand. The poem described the murder and was accompanied by a small drawing of a bleeding heart being stabbed with a knife. According to the prosecution, this suggested that Mindy had carefully planned the crime. The prosecution argued that when Mindy took the weapon from her father's room, she did not intend to kill herself. Instead, they claimed that she had taken the weapon and ambushed her father. Forensic scientists determined that Andy had been shot in the back with a shotgun, refuting the claim that he had attacked first. He could not have attacked with his back turned. A neighbor testified on behalf of the prosecution, stating that he was about 40 yards from the house when Andy opened the door. The neighbor said everything was quiet, and he did not hear Andy swearing or making threats, contrary to Mindy's claim. According to the neighbor, Andy simply walked into the house, and 10 seconds later, gunshots rang out. The defense attorneys argued that Mindy had been overwhelmed and scared for her life, and that she had acted in self-defense as she prepared to become a mother at a young age. The defense presented a key witness, Mindy's mother, Shirley, who described Andy as a cruel and abusive manipulator who had mistreated her and her older sons. Shirley explained that Andy would force the family to sit at the kitchen table for hours, humiliating and insulting them while clearly enjoying their discomfort. She noted that throughout their marriage, Mindy had been spared from these attacks only because she was so young at the time. However, after Shirley left, Andy's anger turned toward his daughter. Things changed when Mindy turned 15 and called Shirley for the first time, saying she could no longer tolerate Andy's bullying behavior. During this time, Mindy's mental state became extremely concerning. She was admitted to a clinic, where she was diagnosed with depression and had attempted suicide. She stayed there for 9 days, was given medication, and was discharged after her condition was deemed stable. However, her father's pressure and abuse continued. According to Mindy, this caused her to develop paranoia. She felt trapped, like a prisoner in her own home, unable to escape her overbearing father. To cope with her fear and pain, she began drinking and smoking marijuana. This behavior eventually attracted the attention of social services. However, it was Andy who contacted them, hoping to address what he described as Mindy's disturbing behavior. Andy was surprised when Laura Alvarado, a child abuse investigator, sided with Mindy after speaking with her. Laura believed that Mindy was not being defiant or out of control. Instead, it appeared that the teenager was feeling anxious and threatened at home. Mindy had pleaded for help, even expressing a desire to move into a foster home to escape her father. She also revealed that her mother had refused to take her in, unwilling to intervene because of the custody agreement. To Laura, this seemed less like the behavior of a rebellious teenager and more like a child who felt trapped and hopeless. Laura had several conversations with Mindy, but during their last meeting, something seemed different and more troubling. Mindy appeared closed off and unwilling to open up. Laura suspected that Andy had threatened her, but further investigation revealed no solid evidence. The most anticipated part of the hearing was Mindy's testimony in her own defense. This was a high-risk strategy, as it could either persuade the jury to sympathize with her or push them in the opposite direction. The outcome depended entirely on whether the jury believed her. Initially, Mindy's attorney decided to take the gamble, arguing that only Mindy could prove who was telling the truth and who was lying. However, the odds were clearly against her. Ultimately, the defense counsel advised taking a safer route. Mindy agreed to a plea bargain, which resulted in a reduced sentence of 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. Soon after, the situation changed. At age 20, Mindy had already served 4 years in prison and was now focused on seeking justice and regaining her freedom. During this time, the legal system had recognized mental distress as a valid defense, even in murder cases. This change provided a new perspective for Mindy's attorney. An appeal was filed and eventually accepted. However, the appeal came with significant risks. If the jury rejected Mindy's testimony, she could face life in prison, with a minimum of 33 years before she could apply for early release. Despite the high stakes, Mindy was determined to fight to clear her name. Both the prosecution and defense returned to present their cases, as they had during the first trial. Andy's wife, Joni, continued to grieve the loss of her husband and remained determined to prove that Mindy was responsible. At trial, Mindy recounted her traumatic experiences of enduring years of physical abuse at the hands of Andy. She described how he threatened her daily, constantly demeaning and humiliating her for seemingly trivial reasons. Desperate to avoid her father, she tried to limit contact, but living in the same house made that nearly impossible. Even brief encounters often escalated into conflicts and confrontations. The prosecutor's office repeated the arguments they had made during the first hearing. Mindy explained that she had chosen the bathroom to end her life, but she hesitated and was unable to go through with it. She discovered she was pregnant and felt a sense of responsibility for her unborn child. For an hour, she struggled with whether to live or die until she heard her father return home. At that moment, she realized she had lost the chance to return the gun to his room without being discovered. Mindy knew her father would be furious if he found out about her plan. Overcome with fear and emotional distress, she decided to protect herself and her child at all costs. Mindy also explained why she shot her father in the back. She said she had told him to check his answering machine, hoping to distract him while she quietly returned the gun to his room. But as she walked into the kitchen, she saw him begin to turn around and noticed the shotgun. Panicked and believing he was about to lunge at her, she pulled the trigger. The jury heard conflicting accounts. Andy's wife, Joni, and a nearby neighbor claimed there were no signs of a struggle or any screams for help, further suggesting that the killing was premeditated rather than an act of self-defense. At the hearing, an anonymous source revealed that a juror was biased. The juror had traveled from another state, motivated by Mindy's story. As a result, a new hearing was scheduled with a different jury. This time, the defense presented a new witness, Mindy's treating physician during her first hospitalization for depression and end-life thoughts. The physician confirmed that Mindy was severely depressed and exhibited clear signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. She would flinch at the sound of any noise or footsteps. The psychiatrist supported Mindy's testimony that she had been humiliated and tortured by her father. Under the circumstances, her actions in self-defense seemed understandable, especially as she feared for her life and the safety of her child. Both sides presented strong arguments. However, the prosecutor's office held back a critical move. They introduced their own psychiatrist, who strongly disagreed with the conclusions of Mindy's treating doctor. Mindy faced a significant setback when her brother disputed claims of domestic violence in the home, allegations often made by both her mother and Mindy. Ultimately, after 24 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mindy Bereniite guilty of murdering her father. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Mindy's lawyers were shocked by the outcome, as they had not anticipated such a harsh sentence. The fate of Mindy's child remains unknown. In an earlier interview, Mindy admitted she knew her actions were wrong but insisted that desperation and fear drove her to kill her father, whom she described as a tyrant. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Troy LaFerrara. In 1994, in the tiny town of North Pole, Alaska, USA, Miranda was born. She had an older sister named Ashley, and both girls were raised by their mother, Elizabeth, a single parent. From the very beginning, their lives were not easy. At the age of 2, Miranda was diagnosed with congenital hip dysplasia. Because of this, from an early age she began to wear a special corrector so that she could be mobile naturally. It was difficult for her. Miranda was often perceived as an outcast with her mother. Everything was going badly. Elizabeth had problems with work. During this tough time, her brother-in-law, Richard, became a source of support. He was a serviceman and seemed like a decent person. He frequently visited her home, and he sometimes even looked after the children. However, as it later turned out, his intentions were much darker. When Miranda and Ashley turned 5 and 6 years old, respectively, Richard abused the girls. He convinced them not to tell anyone about what had happened. Only a few years later, the eldest daughter found the strength to overcome her fear and speak about the abuse. It was then that Elizabeth reported the matter to the police. When officers came to search Richard's house, they found a diary detailing all the abuse he had inflicted on the girls. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison but was released after just 6 years for good behavior. This was his first criminal offense, which contributed to his early release. By the time Miranda and Ashley turned 9 and 10 years old, respectively, they were grappling with the psychological trauma inflicted by Richard. When Elizabeth and her children learned that he would be released, it was a tremendous shock. They decided to move to another city. During this period, their situation worsened. Financial difficulties increased, and they felt betrayed by someone they had trusted. All of this became a significant burden. In their hometown, there was nothing that held them back. Living in proximity to such a threat was unbearable. Miranda hoped for a fresh start with the move, but it did not help her cope with the psychological trauma she had endured. By the age of 12, she began to exhibit rebellious behavior, associating with a group of older, dysfunctional teenagers. They engaged in substance abuse and excessive drinking. In her quest to fit in with this group, Miranda also began to indulge in these harmful behaviors. During this period, she met a man who was 24 years old at the time and had a bad reputation. Unfortunately, Miranda seemed to have always attracted such trouble. She became part of a group of teenagers with unconventional interests. They referred to themselves as a satanic group. Most people considered them gloomy and dangerous. Although Miranda wasn't an official member, she clearly participated in activities because of him, who persuaded her to join in some rituals, after which her soul seemingly belonged to him. When Miranda finally told her mother about what had happened, Elizabeth tried to sever all her daughter's ties with this unhealthy group. Unfortunately, this did not help. She began to run away frequently, developed an addiction to hard substances, and her school performance deteriorated significantly, as did her relationships with classmates. She became very aggressive and often instigated fights. The situation continued to worsen, and Elizabeth struggled with similar addictions. Miranda's biological father intervened. As far as is known, this was the only significant impact he had on her life. At his insistence, Miranda was placed in a clinic where she received help to combat the consequences of her experiences. She was prescribed medications and diagnosed with mental disorders. Unfortunately, this was of little help. According to people who were well acquainted with the dysfunctional family, by the age of 16, Miranda decided to drop out of school. At the same time, she immersed herself in wild parties with her troubled peers. She began a series of relationships with older men, one of whom got her pregnant. Although Miranda decided to keep the child, she didn't even know who the biological father was. After that, Elizabeth asked her to terminate the pregnancy. Meanwhile, relations with her family deteriorated to an extreme point. Ashley could no longer watch her mother and sister turn into addicts. She felt forced to leave home, resulting in Miranda losing her only support. By this time, after Elizabeth's overdose, social services decided to take Miranda away from Elizabeth. She is destined to be in a new family in a small town called Dan in North Carolina. It was here that Miranda met a 20-year-old man named Alit Barber. By this time, Miranda was 17, and Alit was engaged to a girl who was expecting a child with him. This girl later turned out to be another underage student. A love triangle formed around Alit, who had 2 pregnant girls at once. The children were born about a month and a half apart. Now, the group had 2 newborns that needed care. However, all of them are not mature enough to take on the responsibilities of being parents. A few months after the children's birth, Alit's own daughter was hospitalized due to an overdose of sedatives. The behavior of the biological father had always been problematic, and from that moment, it only deteriorated further. His relationship with his fiancée began to suffer, and she ultimately decided to break up with him, leaving with the child for another city. This led to Alit and Miranda being together, forming a full-fledged couple, raising little Arya together. During this time, Miranda willingly talked about her difficult past, and Alit became intrigued as they discussed her experiences with the satanic cult. About a year into their relationship, they decided to leave North Carolina, as their families did not approve of their lifestyle. This escape was necessary to distance themselves from constant conflicts and the supervision of the older generation. Thus, a series of moves began for the young family. They struggled to settle down anywhere for long due to employment difficulties, until they finally reached a suburb in Pennsylvania called Port Trevorton, where only about 400 people lived at that time. They had neither money nor work to establish a foothold. However, Alit had a friend in the area who helped them by providing a place to stay. They were essentially marginalized individuals, making it challenging for them to find regular employment, as they were quite unsociable, which led to difficulties with social interactions. On October 22nd, Miranda, in her search for income, decided to offer herself as an escort service. She emphasized in her advertisement that she was not willing to provide intimate services but was available for companionship and to accompany men to various events. Outwardly, she seemed quite pleasant, and she met several men for $80, engaging in conversations but without intimate contact. It is difficult to say for sure whether she truly adhered to the boundaries she set. In one such encounter, she met a man named Troy LaFerrara, a 42-year-old married man who had been a decent family man and church member for decades. Upon seeing Miranda's advertisement, he became immediately interested. When he called Miranda, he offered a different type of service, not just companionship, which angered her. She refused his proposal, pointing out what she had written in her ad. After some time, however, disturbing thoughts began to plague her mind. Miranda and Alit realized they were dealing with a rather wealthy man since he had made a very generous financial offer. After discussing it, they recognized that this could be a potential way to alleviate their financial struggles. Although they had not previously fantasized about such desires, the allure of crime as a solution to their financial difficulties excited both Alit and Miranda greatly. At the beginning of their relationship, Alit and Miranda immediately developed a common interest in satanic themes. Their conversations were often filled with dark imagery, including mentions of blood. They did not plan to kill a specific person, however, they would often end such discussions with thoughts of finding a victim and experiencing what it was like to take a person's life. When Troy made his generous offer, Miranda calmed down after the unsettling proposal and began discussing the situation with Alit. Troy lived in another city, and their correspondence took place via the internet, which could easily be deleted along with the removal of profiles. They were not connected in any way in real life, making him an ideal target for murder. They realized they could make good money and fulfill their long-standing dream. A couple of hours later, Miranda agreed to Troy's offer and messaged for him. They agreed to meet in a parking lot of a supermarket on the outskirts of the city, where Miranda would be in her car. Miranda suggested going to a neighboring suburb, claiming it was her summer house that she used for work. Naturally, she did not take the initiative alone. Her boyfriend was supposed to be in the back seat of the car to help her bring her dark fantasy to life. Their plan involved disguising tools and a blanket in the car. The plan stipulated that Miranda would say a code phrase, after which Alit would attack the victim. The meeting was scheduled for November 11, 2013, a date chosen deliberately because it turned out to be Elit's birthday. At the appointed hour, the Honda CR-V was waiting for Troy in the shopping center parking lot. Upon entering the vehicle, he immediately paid Miranda the agreed amount. They drove to a neighboring town, also small and provincial. However, instead of taking him to the house they had discussed, Miranda drove to a secluded spot on a quiet, deserted street in a forested area. She stopped the car and said the code phrase, after which Elit began to strangle Troy with a wire. However, they underestimated their victim's strength. Troy turned out to be quite a powerful man, managing to open the door and even pull one leg out onto the street. Elit quickly weakened. Miranda grew nervous because everything was supposed to have ended long ago, yet it did not go according to plan. They did not expect such resistance. The worst part was that Miranda saw headlights approaching in the rearview mirror, which made her realize they could be caught. She took out the knives they had prepared for a bloody massacre, began to stab Troy multiple times in the chest, neck, face, and stomach. When Troy stopped struggling, ceased showing signs of life, Elit got out of the car, put his leg inside, and closed the door from the outside. He then resumed his position in the back seat, and they fled the scene. They drove to another isolated area in the suburbs, where they stripped Troy of his wallet, expensive watch, jewelry, and anything else they could find, except for his mobile phone. Elit insisted they leave the phone behind, fearing they could be tracked by geolocation. They disposed of Troy's body by the side of the road and drove away, convinced they had committed the perfect crime. Miranda and Elit stopped at the nearest Walmart to purchase cleaning agents to tidy up the car interior. They bought special compounds for the seats and mats, as well as a set of gloves for their cleaning efforts. The front of the car was covered in blood, and cleaning it thoroughly took them several hours. They went to another secluded location to wash away the blood. Afterward, they decided to celebrate Elit's birthday. They went to a restaurant and then to a strip club, using the money stolen from their victim. Elit and Miranda simply continued living their lives as if nothing had happened. The next day, a couple of random witnesses stumbled upon Troy's body, which was not even covered with branches or dirt. The man had been carelessly discarded like trash, with 20 stab wounds and marks of strangulation on his neck. Naturally, witnesses immediately called the police. When law enforcement arrived, they discovered not only the body but also the cord from the electrical device used for strangulation. The body was identifiable because a mobile phone remained in the victim's pocket. The police checked the call history and found that on November 11th, he had contacted only 2 numbers, his wife and 1 unsaved number. After investigating the unsaved number, the police traced it back to Miranda and obtained her details, including her residence. She immediately piqued the investigators' interest. Within minutes, the police were on their way to her house. Miranda was detained and taken to the station for questioning. From the very beginning, the story unfolded. Miranda denied any involvement in the crime and claimed not to know the victim. Nevertheless, it was obvious that she was nervous and acting suspiciously. It was enough for the detectives to ask for her mobile phone for her testimony to begin to change. At first, she vehemently refused to provide her mobile phone, but as the detectives examined the contents of her correspondence and contacts, Miranda grew more and more anxious. Despite their efforts, they were unable to find the necessary information immediately. Miranda had nothing to present, and so they simply let her go. When Miranda returned home, something changed within her. She began to confide in the first person she met, her friend, about the murder. However, she did this so abruptly that it seemed awkward from the very start. The young man tried to convince Miranda that she should return to the police and confess everything. Her husband, Elit, joined the conversation and acted shocked by the story. Miranda clearly felt remorse. She confessed to her friend that she had stabbed the victim with a knife, but she did not mention Elit at all. Throughout the conversation, her husband never confessed to even being present in the car. Even the friend got the impression that he was manipulating Miranda, trying to impose a greater sense of guilt on her, which seemed strange. Instead of taking any part of the blame, Alit feigned shock and even began to cry. The friend did not suspect Alit could be involved in the crime. On the contrary, he believed Alit to be innocent. Miranda struggled with her thoughts most of the night. Finally, around 4 a.m., she gathered her strength and returned to the police station, where she recounted the murder, insisting that it had been self-defense. She confessed that she had agreed to meet Troy but not to provide intimate services. She had only intended to escort him. However, when Troy insisted on paying for intimate, Miranda informed him that she was only 16, which seemed to unsettle him. She claimed he would face criminal prosecution if she reported him to the police. This was a lie, as she had just turned 19. Miranda was clearly trying to shift some of the blame onto the victim to justify her actions. According to her, instead of backing off, Troy began to force her to have intimate. When he realized she was not going to comply, he became aggressive, and she felt that her life was threatened. Recalling her childhood experiences with her Uncle Richard, she claimed to have defended herself. However, Miranda's words sounded implausible. The 20 stab wounds she inflicted, which did not resemble defensive wounds. Moreover, a cord was found with which Troy had been strangled, leaving a mark on his neck that contradicted Miranda's account. It appeared that a third party had been involved. To verify her claims, the police began tracking movements before the meeting. They quickly found surveillance footage filmed in the parking lot just 5 minutes before the scheduled encounter. The recording showed an unknown young man hiding in the back seat of the car, who was soon identified as 22-year-old Alit, Miranda's husband. It was decided to question him. The criminals clearly had not thought through their plan, as they lacked a coherent version of events. As a result, Alit provided a version that was completely different from Miranda's account. Detectives immediately noted that while Miranda was very emotional, Alit showed no feelings. He was cold but surprisingly quick to talk, as if he had long wanted to discuss the crime. While describing the attack, Alit spent much more time discussing the purchases made with the stolen money, including a detailed account of the food they had eaten on his birthday. His lack of concern about the murder was unsettling. After this, Alit and Miranda were arrested and remained in custody until the hearing. However, by that day, both had retracted their statements, now claiming their innocence. This contradicted what Miranda had said during a television interview shortly before the hearing began, where several journalists had spoken to her. Miranda participated in a viral interview, stating that this was not her first experience with such circumstances, and claimed she had stopped counting the victims after reaching the 22nd murder from 2008 to 2013. However, all this seemed absurd. The family spoke out in defense of Miranda, and everyone who knew her well insisted that she had lied her entire life. The reasons for her actions were always the same: Miranda just wanted to draw attention to herself and enjoyed it. Despite this, she insisted that all the murders began when she became a member of a Satanist group in her teens. Miranda avoided details and did not even know the names of the victims, yet she persistently called herself a serial killer. She claimed that her group only killed those who committed bad deeds, for which she was nicknamed Dextrin. During her conversations, she was unable to provide details about these episodes, of which she claimed there were many more. She mentioned living in Alaska during this period, where there were reportedly many missing people. It seemed that all this was a blatant lie. Additionally, her behavior clearly did not align with that of an experienced criminal. She even left the victim's mobile phone right in his pocket without hiding or destroying it. Troy LaFerrara was actually the first victim. During the investigation, it turned out that 2 more men had responded to Miranda's ad, but they did not come, thus saving their lives. However, there were opposing opinions. Psychologists worked extensively with her, and some were convinced that she had killed people before. She frequently talked about her life, including all these alleged ritual murders, and recounting these stories was one of her favorite activities during their relationship. She spoke eloquently about these stories, although she refused to repeat them to journalists, claiming it was to protect the other participants in the murders. Her friends thought she was possessed, while others in the prosecutor's office believed the criminals were trying to avoid the death penalty by claiming insanity. All this was very difficult to prove or disprove, given the numerous statements from the detainees. Before the hearing began in 2016, everything was still uncertain. However, other upheavals occurred. The mother of Miranda voluntarily took her own life. She could not cope with the public pressure of being accused of raising a monster. By that time, she had been struggling with addiction and mental health issues for many years, and her relatives believed she simply could not manage them. She did not leave a suicide note, so it is not known for certain how much influence her daughter had on this decision. Many believe that the public pressure surrounding Miranda was the last straw. That same year, while in prison, Miranda asked for a divorce from her husband. She continued to insist that she was a victim from the day she was born, claiming she was surrounded by manipulators, liars, and criminals. One day, she recounted how she was tied to a bed and had an abortion at home. This happened after she told her mother she was pregnant but did not know by whom. Her ex-boyfriend allegedly forced her into prostitution from the age of 12. However, it is difficult to determine which, if any, of these claims were true. Despite being diagnosed with several abnormalities in the hospital, it remains uncertain whether she ever took medication for conditions such as attention deficit disorder, schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder. Feeling the attention and interest of the public, Miranda continued to spin one tale after another. Now she remembered the name of a boy, whom she claimed was killed in another ritual. She then stated that she voluntarily went to the police because she wanted to be arrested to finally stop killing. Elit and Miranda were found guilty. However, there were difficulties in determining the punishment due to their young age. The prosecutor's office fought in vain for the death penalty but was unsuccessful, largely due to organizations advocating for the abolition of the death penalty. As a result, in September 2014, they were sentenced to life imprisonment. Aria fell under the jurisdiction of Child Protective Services. Given how public the scandal was, the little girl's name was changed, and she was placed in a foster family. Most of all, the murder shocked Troy LaFerrara's wife. She had no idea her husband was living a double life, and she was even more shocked by the tragic ending. The case of Troy LaFerrara stands as a somber testament to the destructive power of unresolved trauma, the allure of darkness, and the fragility of human lives caught in the crosshairs of desperation and choice. This narrative is more than a recounting of a crime. It is a profound exploration of how personal pain, toxic relationships, and societal neglect can coalesce into an act of irreversible violence, leaving a trail of devastation that echoes far beyond its immediate victims. Miranda's journey from a vulnerable child to a convicted killer is a harrowing descent marked by pivotal moments of suffering and rebellion. Diagnosed with a physical disability at age 2, her early years were shaped by the struggle for mobility and the isolation it bred. The abuse she and Ashley endured at 5 and 6, respectively, from Richard, a trusted family figure whose dark intentions were later exposed in his diary, planted seeds of trauma that would grow unchecked. Troy LaFerrara, a church-going husband and father, entered this story as an unlikely victim, drawn by Miranda's online ad for companionship in October 2013. His offer of payment for more than she advertised sparked a plan born of financial need and dark fantasy. This was not a crime of passion but a calculated act, driven by greed and a perverse desire to experience murder, rooted in the satanic themes that had long captivated their conversations. The story of Troy LaFerrara is a mirror to society's failures and humanity's capacity for darkness, a call to confront the roots of violence, trauma, isolation, and the allure of destructive bonds, while mourning the lives it claims. For Miranda, it is a life sentence that began long before prison, a confinement rooted in a childhood stolen by abuse and an adulthood lost to her own choices. For Elit, it is the end of a path paved by recklessness and a chilling lack of remorse. For the rest of us, it is a plea to see the unseen, to intervene before despair turns deadly, and to honor the sanctity of every life, however flawed, that crosses our path. In the quiet of Port Trevorton, Troy's memory endures as a silent witness to a tragedy that need not have been, a life extinguished by two souls who chose darkness over light, leaving only questions and sorrow in their wake. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alexandra Kogut. Alexandra Kogut, 18, was a freshman at the State University of New York at Brockport. She was outgoing and fun-loving. Alexandra had been in a relationship with her boyfriend, Clayton Whitmore, for about 2 years. The couple had met in high school in New Hartford, New York, where they began dating. Despite attending different schools after graduation, they had maintained a close relationship. Although their schools were 3 hours apart, they kept in touch through phone calls, social media messages, and frequent visits. Clayton was a great guy who played hockey at Utica College in New York while studying to become an accountant. He was a skilled athlete and a promising hockey player, and many believed he had a bright future ahead of him. Alexandra's family and friends liked Clayton and considered him a promising young man. They hoped that their relationship would develop into something serious over time. In high school, Alexandra had participated in track and field as well as swimming. She also represented her university in competitions. On Friday, September 28, 2012, Alexandra was excited because her boyfriend, Clayton, was coming to visit her for the weekend. They hadn't seen each other in a long time, and Alexandra missed him. Around 3 p.m., she asked her friend and neighbor if she could borrow some clothes. The two often shared outfits, and her friend agreed. Together, they picked out a nice dress. After trying on dresses, Alexandra went to a swim team meeting. She was running late, so Clayton, who had arrived earlier, had to wait for her. Alexandra called him to let him know she would be late. When Alexandra returned from the swim team meeting, she met Clayton, and together they went to visit a friend of his for dinner. They didn't return to campus until after midnight. Alexandra had assured her mother that she would call or text when she got back to avoid causing concern, but she didn't. This was unusual because Alexandra was always reliable in such matters. Her mother became increasingly worried, sensing that something was wrong. At 2:42 a.m., her mother decided to contact university security and requested a welfare check on her daughter. University security responded quickly and went to Alexandra's dormitory to check. They knocked on the door, which was unlocked, and entered the room. Inside, they found a horrific scene. The dormitory room, which Alexandra and her roommate shared, was covered in blood. In the middle of the room lay a young girl, face down and dead. The victim had multiple injuries, and it was immediately clear that this was not an accident but a brutal murder. Alarmed, they quickly called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they found a photo of Alexandra and Clayton together, and they recognized Clayton. That night, the police saw him walking down the street with a girl. He was holding an open can of beer, which attracted the attention of a patrol officer. Clayton was ticketed for the open can of beer but remained calm and cooperative. He then threw the can away and crossed the street, disappearing from sight. As the investigation progressed, it was revealed that Alexandra and her boyfriend, Clayton, had gone to her dorm room together. It was later discovered that Clayton had planned to flee to Canada after the incident. Police began interviewing dorm residents to identify witnesses and gather more evidence. However, most students were not in their rooms at the time. Many had gone home for the weekend, while others were partying or visiting friends. Some residents reported hearing screams and sounds of fighting in the distance but paid little attention, as such noises were common. At around 3 a.m., Clayton's father called 911 and informed the police that his son had confessed to the murder. He explained that Clayton had called him, sounding very agitated, and admitted to doing something terrible. However, Clayton's father had no further details to provide and suggested that the police contact Clayton directly. He also mentioned that he did not know his son's exact location. Police attempted to contact Clayton and trace his phone but were unsuccessful. When they called Clayton's father back, he mentioned that Clayton's girlfriend was in Brockport and that Clayton might still be with her. At this point, police determined that Clayton was still near the crime scene. A patrol car was dispatched to the scene approximately 45 minutes after Clayton's father's initial call. Shortly thereafter, Clayton himself called 911, stating that he wanted to surrender because he had committed a terrible crime. Police located and arrested Clayton Whitmore at approximately 4 a.m. at a rest stop on the New York State Thruway. At this point, police confirmed that the murdered woman was Alexandra Kogut. They discovered that she had used her key card to enter the dormitory building just before she was killed. At the police station, Clayton was questioned to determine what had happened that night and why Alexandra had been killed. Clayton insisted that his relationship with Alexandra had been normal and respectful. However, he said things had taken a turn for the worse on the evening of the incident. According to him, Alexandra had yelled at him in public for no apparent reason. Although she was sweet and cheerful with others, he felt that she had disrespected him. Clayton believed that her behavior was unreasonable and unacceptable. Clayton admitted that he had been holding back resentment toward Alexandra but finally lost control after being fined while walking down the street. He returned to her room feeling tense. Alexandra told him that she wanted to have a serious talk. She revealed that she suspected Clayton of cheating because, some time ago, a photo of an unfamiliar girl had appeared on his phone. When he failed to provide a clear explanation, Alexandra began provoking him by shouting and acting disrespectfully and aggressively. She then began to push him. Finally, Clayton could not take the pressure anymore. In a fit of rage, he attacked Alexandra, throwing her against the wall. He then began hitting her and was unable to stop. He only realized the severity of his actions when he saw Alexandra lying unconscious on the floor, showing no signs of life. Clayton admitted that, during the attack, he had not thought to stop or try to help her. He told police he had been angry and claimed that it was not intentional and that he had no plan or desire to harm her. Clayton initially fled the scene of the crime. After realizing the severity of his actions, he called his father and confessed. His father urged him to surrender to the police, which he eventually did. Although he expressed remorse, Clayton avoided confirming whether a weapon had been used in the murder. He later revealed more details, stating that after punching Alexandra several times, he noticed her breathing had become labored, and she was making wheezing sounds. In response, he took a curling iron and struck her on the head until the noises stopped. Clayton claimed he was fully conscious at the time. Alexandra's autopsy supported his claim, confirming blunt force trauma to the head as the cause of death. Police found blood on the curling iron, along with other evidence indicating that Alexandra's head injury had also been caused by hitting the wall. Clayton was charged with murder and held without bail pending trial. However, he later recanted his confession and denied his guilt. The investigation continued for a long time as police interviewed people who had been involved with Clayton. It was highly likely that he had intentionally harmed Alexandra. Their suspicions were reinforced by the testimony of Clayton's ex-girlfriend, who revealed that she had been subjected to constant violence from him. She decided to end their relationship after he tried to strangle her during an argument. At one point, it seemed as though he might actually kill her, but he ultimately held back. Out of fear, she fled to another city to escape him. Several of Clayton's friends also confirmed his aggressive and erratic behavior. They described him as short-tempered and hostile. One friend recalled an incident at a bar where Clayton wielded a knife and threatened a group of strangers. By the spring of 2014, the case went to trial. The prosecution presented a recording of Clayton confessing to the murder, along with various pieces of physical evidence collected by forensic experts. His fingerprints and DNA were found at the crime scene. The defense acknowledged that Clayton had committed the murder but argued that it was unintentional. Their goal was to secure a reduced sentence. Clayton's attorneys made it clear to the jury and the court that Clayton had been extremely distressed that evening due to being insulted by Alexandra, being fined by the police, and being pressured by Alexandra during a conversation about his betrayal. They argued that these factors had caused Clayton to become emotionally unstable. They claimed that he had lost control and directed his anger at Alexandra. The lawyers stressed that Alexandra had provoked Clayton and that the murder should be considered to have occurred in a state of emotional distress. Clayton blamed his aggressive and emotionally unstable behavior on his father. He explained that his aggression stemmed from years of abuse at the hands of his father, who had treated him and other family members cruelly. According to Clayton, he had suffered years of pressure, moral degradation, and physical abuse from his father. Clayton recounted incidents such as his father beating his brother with a baseball bat, breaking his sister's nose, and kicking his mother. Once, when his father found the children's fingerprints in the car, he tried to force the children to eat the TV remote. Clayton expressed remorse for not being able to resist his father's abusive influence, admitting that he had become a mirror image of his father, whom he despised. Clayton admitted that this led him to humiliate and abuse his girlfriend, act aggressively, and harbor hatred for the world. He apologized to Alexandra's family, expressing genuine remorse for his inability to change his behavior. The prosecution pointed out that there were almost no photographs of Clayton smiling. He appeared cold and distant in all of them. Was this behavior part of his nature? While prosecutors did not dispute Clayton's allegations of abuse by his father, they argued that this did not excuse his actions. The trial lasted about 3 weeks, during which dozens of witnesses testified. The jury deliberated and eventually returned a verdict, finding Clayton Whitmore guilty. He was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Clayton showed no emotion throughout the trial, but after the verdict was announced, he broke down and cried. Notably, Alexandra's family was shocked to learn about the alleged abuse she endured during the relationship. They were unaware of any problems between Alexandra and Clayton, as she had never mentioned any cruelty or aggression toward her. However, when police examined Alexandra's phone, they uncovered at least 30 threatening voice messages from Clayton. It is believed there may have been more, but these recordings were not thoroughly analyzed. Police dismissed this evidence, citing the need for voice analysis, which could have further delayed the case. As a result, none of these threats were presented in court. This evidence could have led to the case being reclassified as first-degree murder, which carries a harsher sentence than manslaughter. About an hour before Alexandra was fatally beaten, she posted a final message on her social media page. It is unclear what was on her mind at the time, but she may have sensed impending danger. Following Alexandra's tragic death, her relatives established a charity to support women who have endured domestic violence, encouraging them to report their experiences and raising public awareness of the issue. Supporters of the charity identify themselves by painting their pinkies purple, a tribute to Alexandra's favorite color. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Heath Stocks. On January 17, 1997, a man in Lonoke, Arkansas, made what he calls one of the greatest mistakes of his life. 20-year-old Heath Stocks loved his family. One minute he arrived at his family home, the next minute, he found his entire family dead on the living room floor. To this day, he claims that his mother and sister always supported him. Although he and his father had a tumultuous relationship, he maintains that they did not deserve to die. This is the story of Heath Stocks, Jack Walls, and the Boy Scouts of America. Lonoke, Arkansas is a quaint town that many would describe as the ideal American life. Like any small town, the residents were family-oriented, and their bonds were tight. The residents of Lonoke held their values close to their chests, and the town became a standout moral compass to those around it. 3 of the most prevalent aspects of Lonoke were its dutiful church scene, appreciation for sports, and love for the Boy Scouts, along with their mantra, respect, honor, and obey. Much like many boys in America, Heath Stocks was a long-time member of the Boy Scouts, eventually reaching the coveted Eagle Scout status. His mother, Barbara, and his sister, Heather, shared a tight bond with him throughout his childhood. The only wedge in this seemingly perfect family life appeared to be his father, Joe. Heather was definitely his protector. She apparently felt very threatened by their father because Heath wasn't going to be the perfect child. Heath did typical kid things and made kid mistakes that were unacceptable to Joe. He struggled with learning disabilities and had ADHD, which affected his ability to get work done at school. Heath and his group had a favorite scoutmaster, Charles Jack Walls III, who was kind and doting. The boys under his care quickly formed a strong bond with Walls. Not only was he a respected father, but the Walls name was well known in Lonoke, thanks to his family's wealth and his father's work as a judge. Everyone wanted to be one of Walls's boys. Stocks himself said in an interview at the time that when people had problems with their boys, Walls always said he could put them in the Scouts and mold them into upstanding young men that their parents could be proud of. The use of the word mold in Stocks' recounting is particularly haunting, considering the context of his case. Walls was not just a guide, he was a leader, a great influence, a savior, as Stocks' grandmother put it. Now, that term drips with painful irony. The people of Lonoke, Arkansas, would look at Jack Walls and describe him as magic. He was a perfect citizen who encouraged young children to be the best they could be, a role model for all. To most, he was the ideal American citizen, the perfect person to look after their children. Unfortunately, that trust would be shattered in one of the most gruesome ways. For many parents of Scouts under Walls, he became a confidant for any issues or conflicts. The Scouts would report their worries to Walls, and in turn, their parents would seek advice from him. This allowed Walls to insert himself into the family dynamics of countless people. When their parents were not spending time with their children, Walls sometimes took on the role of teacher, introducing them to military skills as they shot guns and hunted. Other times, the topics veered into discussions about alcohol and adult magazine. Two of his Scouts, Doug Hogan and Mark McConnell, reported Walls' misconduct to their families in the summer of 1992. Cletus Hogan, Doug Hogan's father, had Jack Walls resign from the Boy Scouts of America after reporting the incident. However, when he turned the case over to the courts, Walls used his reputation and power within the Lonoke community to get the charges dismissed, slandering the Hogan as people who wanted a part of Walls' fortune. Doug Hogan, in turn, became a target for the other boys in the Scouts due to their growing protectiveness of Walls and their newfound skills in firearms. Heath Stocks was one of the boys groomed by Walls during this time. Behind the scenes, Walls began sowing discord between Stocks and Stocks' father, further establishing himself as a father figure in Stocks' life. Joe Stocks, Stocks' father, was distant and often physically disciplined him as a child, so Stocks turned to his trusted Scout leader with his boyhood problems, further entrenching himself under Walls' control. When Stocks' mother, Barbara, discovered that he had been assaulted by Walls, she insisted that Stocks file charges against him. However, the charges all but disappeared by the time Stocks entered college. He sought Walls' approval for almost everything he did. Walls had firmly grasped control over Stocks' life, and the turmoil that Stocks experienced would soon come to a head. After Stocks took a weekend off from college, one horrifying day, Barbara walked in on Walls and Stocks together. She never blamed her son, nor did she attempt to interrogate him. She simply went to her pastor to seek advice on the terrifying situation. Stocks inevitably confided in his mother and sister Heather about what had been happening to him. This sent Walls into a frenzy and asked him to solve the problem. After years of insistence that Walls' protection was of the utmost importance, Stocks heard the order and obeyed. On the evening of January 17, 1997, Stocks went to his family home and ransacked it. His sister walked in just as he had his mouth around the barrel of a .45 caliber handgun. Their mother followed her soon after, and then their father seconds later. They were dead. Heath had taken the gun and shot them all. He had killed the problem as ordered. His entire family was dead, and as the courts would soon find, it was entirely his fault. Even if Walls was there to ensure the deed was done, it was Stocks who pulled the trigger. Stocks said, He went back into the living room, got on his knees, and stuck his gun in his mouth. About that time, his mom came through, and he saw his dad's face. The next thing he know, they're all dead. Stocks fled the scene and disposed of his gun in a nearby river. The other items were put inside a dumpster by a Pizza Hut in town. Stocks sought solace at the apartment of a college friend at Henderson State University, where police would find and arrest him at 6 a.m. the next day. Heath Stocks was charged with 3 counts of capital murder. Investigator Steve Finch led the Stocks family murder investigation and conducted several interviews with Stocks to determine the motive for the murders. It was then that Stocks reported the manipulation and abuse he suffered at the hands of his scoutmaster to the police. It was speculated that Walls was even present during the murders, and yet, when Stocks was arrested and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences, Walls was not brought under investigation. No display of evidence, no calling of witnesses, and no defense whatsoever. The guilty plea, made at Walls's command, provided little reason or purpose. However, Walls would not remain innocent forever. Eventually, an investigation was launched against Walls thanks to the bravery of his own nephew, another victim of Walls. Like the other victims, Wade Knox had a strong relationship with his uncle. Knox joined the Boy Scouts because of Walls' influence and wanted Walls as his troop leader. He was also a part of Stocks' Boy Scout troop. There were many similarities between the young Stocks and Knox, from their upbringing to their personal difficulties, which Walls exploited like a parasite. Karen Knox said of her son, Knox was probably 6 or 7 when he joined the Boy Scouts. He became a Boy Scout because of Walls. Walls was his uncle and encouraged it. It was as normal as it could be. When Knox was 5, she noticed things about him that just weren't right. He had attention deficit issues, he was on medication, and then he was diagnosed with dyslexia. They knew it was going to be hard. By 3rd grade, things fell apart at school. Wade could no longer play sports or get along with anybody. He did not respect authority. It was just constant turmoil. Knox would get so upset that he would run away, and Walls would smooth everything over. They lived right across the street from Walls, and there were always scouts over there. Wade Knox, Walls' nephew, had been abused by his uncle since the age of 7. Reportedly, when Walls was out washing his car, Knox put a gun to Walls' head and forced Walls to confess to Wade's parents that he, his brother, and several other scouts, including Heath, had repeatedly abused by him. Later traumatized by the things Walls had done to him, Wade Knox committed to end his own life. His family started the Wade Knox Children's Advocacy Center in hopes that no other family would have to endure the turmoil they experienced. In hindsight, many people who view the case of the Stocks family murders speculate that Stocks did not act alone and that the trial was mishandled. Many believe that a guilty plea by Stocks would not have been submitted if proper action had been taken by the investigators. These claims, while lacking physical evidence, were supported by the then special prosecutor, Betty Dickey. Due to Walls' influence over the town, the victims' families were not going to file charges and simply allowed Walls to admit himself into a mental health facility. This changed as soon as they learned of the details of what Walls had done to their children. This was when Stocks admitted that Walls had ordered him to kill his parents, claiming Walls was present to ensure it was done. Though in later interviews, Stocks stated he did not remember if anyone else was in the house on the day he killed his family. Eventually, Walls was charged with 6 counts of abuse assault, no penalties in connection with the Stocks family case. He now serves 1 life sentence plus an additional 40 years. Betty Dickey remarked about the incident, they were looking at 50 to 100 young boys over a period of 20 to 30 years that he'd molested. The reason only 6 counts were charged against Walls was due to the statute of limitations. In 2020, Heath Stocks was interviewed by Fox 16 about the murders and the abuse he suffered at the hands of Jack Walls. Surprisingly, he did not blame the Boy Scouts for the abuse, despite their recent bankruptcy and the abuse scandals that had emerged. He did not even blame Walls himself for his parents' deaths. Stocks claims he has forgiven Walls, mainly for his own mental health. Also asserting that although Walls was not responsible for pulling the trigger, he was the reason Stocks' mind had been warped enough to commit such a gruesome act. Stocks also places blame on his parents for insisting that he remain in the Boy Scouts despite several warning signs. Currently, Stocks remains in prison with a lifetime of incarceration ahead of him. If he had not been subjected to such thorough abuse in his childhood years, his family would still be alive today. Stocks had been a victim of gruesome crimes for years, which deteriorated his mental health until he hit rock bottom. 3 of the closest people in his life were dead due to his actions and the abuse of a powerful man. If Jack Walls had not taken the innocence of over 50 young Boy Scouts, much could have been saved and protected. His nephew, Wade Knox, would also be alive. Justice may have been served when Walls received his lifetime sentence, but there are questions that still remain unanswered. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Marina Diaz-Vallecillos. Marina Diaz-Vallecillos was born on December 24, 2002, in Granada, Andalusia, Spain. She grew up in Granada with her mother, Teresa Vallecillos, and her 4 sisters, Alba, Andrea, Lucia, and Alejandra. Marina was a sociable girl who enjoyed spending time with her friends. Her sister, Andrea, shared that, after finishing high school, she started working at a pharmacy, although it is unclear how she got the job. Her life took a significant turn at the age of 16. At that time, she met a woman named Yasmina, who was born in the late 1980s and was nearly twice her age. However, Marina's family has been strongly opposed to the relationship from the beginning. Since Marina and Yasmina started dating in 2019, the family has been concerned, and her mother has always lived in a state of insecurity. Teresa reported Yasmina to the police several times, fearing for her daughter's safety. Marina was a gentle, sweet, and calm person, which made her family worry that she might be vulnerable to Yasmina's manipulation. It is unclear whether the police took any action regarding these reports, but it is certain that Marina and Yasmina's relationship persisted, with Yasmina displaying increasingly aggressive behavior. Marina confided all the details of her relationship to her mother and sisters, leaving them deeply worried, as Yasmina was extremely cruel. Yasmina repeatedly cut Marina's hair without any reason and used psychological violence by threatening her and attempting to kick her out of the house. Despite this, Yasmina did not want to end the relationship. Yasmina told Marina that if they ever broke up, she would burn down her house and harm all of Marina's relatives. Such a volatile situation was bound to have dire consequences. According to Marina's cousin, Shumar, the reason Marina never reported Yasmina's abusive behavior was her fear of Yasmina's reaction and potential retaliation. What mattered most to Marina was ensuring the safety of her family and avoiding putting them in danger. Over time, as Yasmina and Marina began living together, the violence escalated, resulting in severe social isolation. By early 2021, after being together for roughly a year and a half, they relocated to an undisclosed location, choosing not to share the address with Marina's family. Teresa, the mother of Marina, shared that they felt powerless because they were unable to locate their daughter or provide support. Conflicting information from acquaintances only complicates the situation further, leaving Teresa uncertain about whether they live in a house or an apartment, or even about the exact area of the city where they are located. Teresa lived in constant fear, unable to contact her daughter and worried something terrible might happen. Tragically, on April 13, 2021, her worst fears came true. At around 3 p.m., Yasmina appeared at the police station in Motril, a city on the Mediterranean coast in Granada, and confessed to the crime. Yasmina told the police that the prior day, while she and Marina were at their rented home, a heated argument broke out between them after breakfast. According to Yasmina, Marina eventually took a knife and threatened her, stating that she could no longer endure their relationship after a year and a half of suffering from both mental and physical abuse. Yasmina claimed she believed Marina would attack her with the knife, prompting her to seize the weapon and strike first. Yasmina explained that Marina had begun screaming and calling for help from the landlord, who happened to be their neighbor. However, before anyone could intervene or understand what was happening, Yasmina threw Marina to the floor and continued stabbing her. After realizing that Marina had died, Yasmina decided not to seek help. Instead, she attempted to cover up the crime by wrapping Marina's body in a sheet, taking a shower, and thoroughly cleaning the entire apartment with cleaning products to erase any evidence. Yasmina disposed of the knife by throwing it into a garbage container along the road leading to the village of Gorgarka, located in the municipality of Velis de Banatl. Around 5 p.m., Yasmina went to the port of Motril to meet her friend Antonio Manuel, to whom she confessed the murder. She asked for his assistance in finding a place to bury Marina's body. Consequently, Antonio was accused of being an accessory to the crime due to his involvement in the incident following the murder. Initially, Yasmina insisted that she had sought his help. Later, when Antonio was arrested, Yasmina changed her statement, claiming she had only sought emotional support from him during a difficult time. Following Yasmina's confession, the authorities went to the apartment she shared with Marina, where the crime had taken place. Inside, they found Marina's body wrapped in a blanket. Investigators confirmed Yasmina's account, noting that the apartment had been meticulously cleaned, leaving behind no visible evidence of the crime, apart from a strong smell of cleaning products. Due to challenges in collecting evidence, assistance was requested from a specialized unit of the National Police in Motril, experts in detecting altered crime scene traces. This team arrived in Granada on April 14, 2021, shortly after Marina's remains were transported to the city's Anatomical Institute, where all necessary tests were conducted. The results revealed that Marina had died from 24 stab wounds inflicted by Yasmina using a sharp object. It was also determined that Marina, aged 18, had suffered over 20 blows and other injuries to various parts of her body. On April 16, 4 days after the crime, the Court of First Instance No. 3 in Motril ordered Yasmina to be held in pretrial custody without bail. Despite her lack of prior criminal record, the Supreme Court of Andalusia stated that this decision aimed to protect the investigation and prevent her from fleeing. On the same day, the court decided to temporarily release Antonio Manuel, initially suspected of helping conceal the crime, as a precautionary measure. Because no formal request for his arrest had been made, he was required to report to the authorities every Tuesday, and his passport was confiscated. On the same day, the government of Granada announced that the case would be treated as an instance of domestic violence since Yasmina and Marina had been living together. Although the authorities acted swiftly, the trial did not commence until December 13, 2022. Friends and family of Marina gathered outside the court, shouting and demanding justice for the young woman who had tragically lost her life shortly after she had turned 18. During the trial, Marina's family lawyer, Jesus Huertos, highlighted the brutal nature of Yasmina's actions, detailing the extensive injuries Marina had suffered. He said that Yasmina deserved a life sentence but should still be given the opportunity to rehabilitate. Additionally, Marina's psychologist, who also counseled her mother, Teresa, testified in court. The psychologist revealed that Marina had repeatedly expressed her fear of Yasmina's violent behavior and had stated that she no longer wanted to continue the relationship. Other witnesses provided statements backing this narrative. The prosecution argued that Yasmina had intentionally prolonged Marina's suffering before carrying out the killing, emphasizing the cruelty of the act. However, unlike the family's lawyer, the prosecution did not seek a life sentence. Instead, they recommended a 17-year prison term. The defense attorney representing Yasmina argued that she had been in poor physical and mental condition at the time of the crime. On that day, she had allegedly taken antidepressants while also consuming illegal substances, which impaired her perception of reality. According to the lawyer, Yasmina reacted violently when Marina expressed her desire to leave the house and approached her with a knife. The lawyer asserted that Yasmina was unable to fully comprehend her actions and requested her acquittal during the initial hearing. During the trial, Yasmina expressed remorse, acknowledging the difficulty she had in understanding her actions, while admitting her awareness of the gravity of the crime. She revealed that her decision to surrender to the authorities stemmed from her realization that Marina did not deserve to be buried in an unmarked, improvised grave. Yasmina explained that her intent was not only to ensure Marina received a proper burial but also to take responsibility for her actions. However, she insisted that she never intended to harm her partner, claiming her actions were meant to protect Marina instead. These statements conflicted with testimony from Marina's relatives as well as Yasmina's initial statements. In early March 2023, a provisional court in Granada sentenced Yasmina to 17 years in prison for murder, taking into account mitigating factors such as her relationship with Marina and her voluntary confession. After serving her prison term, she will be subjected to conditional release for 5 years. Additionally, Yasmina must fulfill financial and personal obligations, including paying €75,000 in compensation to Marina's mother and €22,000 to Marina's sisters, Alba, Andrea Lucia, and Alejandra. She is also prohibited from contacting them for 22 years. Regarding Antonio Manuel, who was initially accused of helping to conceal the crime, the prosecutor's office recommended a prison sentence of 15 months. However, due to his cognitive disability, judicial authorities ultimately dropped all charges against him. Marina's family announced plans to appeal the decision, arguing that the punishment was insufficient given the severity of the crime. In public statements, they criticized the lack of support from Spanish legal institutions, particularly since the case was not fully classified as domestic violence. They expressed deep concern about the authorities' stance on this issue, which they deemed highly significant. In their appeal efforts, the prosecution aimed not only to increase Yasmina's sentence but also to establish a precedent for similar cases. Meanwhile, Yasmina's defense announced plans to file an appeal, seeking either a reduction in the charges or a complete reversal of the verdict. In July 2023, the Supreme Court of Andalusia rejected both appeals, upholding the original sentence of 17 years in prison along with the restrictions imposed on Yasmina. The court confirmed that the sentence was appropriate and justified based on the evidence presented during the trial. In press interviews, Teresa, Marina's mother, shared the hardships she and her 4 daughters faced following Marina's tragic death. She also expressed frustration over the authorities' failure to implement adequate protective measures, despite the numerous complaints she had personally filed.